Good evening, everyone. I'd like to begin this regular Board of Finance meeting for Monday, September 20th, 2021. Call to order. First item on the agenda is public forum. Anybody wishing to address the Board of Finance in public forum? Seeing none. Item number 2, we'll receive the report on JCI Energy Performance Contract. David Newman, appreciate you joining us. I know that you had a bit of an issue last month, and you were kind enough to join us this month to provide us an update and summary.
No problem.
Welcome to our meeting. I'll hand the floor over to you in just a moment. I just want to let everybody on the Board of Finance know, if you didn't hear moments ago, there was an email summary that was sent by Cliff Gurnham to me, and I forwarded to the Board of Finance members, as well as to our first selectman and to Tracy Brinkman to post on Board Pack for record. I believe, David, this is a document that you're going to be reviewing. I'm not sure if you wanted to share your screen, if that was your intent, but if it is, we can allow you that, and we can go from here.
Or that would be fine. I tried turning on the camera. It doesn't want to turn on for whatever reason. But I can certainly share. I'm assuming Cliff shared. I kind of did a very concise summary of the change order 2.
Okay.
For the JCI project. So if you want, I could put that up on the screen. We could kind of go through it. It runs through a summary of the changes that have occurred.
Okay. David, I believe that Tracy just provided you with the host opportunity to share your screen.
Okay, great. Do that right now. All right, just bear with 1 second. See if I can.
Not yet.
Okay.
Okay, where is it? Hopefully this works.
Okay.
Okay.
Bingo.
All right, we can see
All
it.
set. Thank you, David. Good job. Okay.
Okay, it worked.
Excellent.
Not sure why the video isn't working, but that's okay. Okay. All right. So really in quick summary, what we wanted to do is as we know, there's been a long process with the GCI contract and EPC project. And a lot of the changes and things that have occurred over the time ultimately culminated into the JCI change order 2. So what I did was I really just boiled down what the specific changes were and just kind of a narrative to kind of explain them, because the change order itself really doesn't give the explanations. It really just reconciles what was adjusted. So the first item that was in that change order was a reference to a contingency of $15,000 for a potential future relocation of solar PV modules. The long story short on that was at the Adams Middle School, when they did the install, it was identified there was it's a very small area, but we raised objection to the fact that they had placed panels on an area with an out of warranty roof. So we took exception to that because at some point when you have to replace that roof, you may have to now temporarily shift those panels off that roof to replace the roof, and that you would encumber a burden that you shouldn't have had to. So they are giving a credit of $15,000 to facilitate the temporary relocation of those panels when the time comes that you have to change that roof. So you're getting a credit to acknowledge that they should not have done that. Okay. The second item was there's a small amount of 5305 that's also a credit back to Guilford. I just delineate just kind of what those were. Again, these were items that came up during the construction process that we kept accounting of and asked Johnson to provide credit for them. One item being a freezer alarm failure. It's an item that we questioned because it was supposed to by scope of work tied into the building management alarm system, so that if a freezer failed, you guys got an alert. The alert failed and some food was lost. So we asked Johnson to compensate the town for that, and they did. Street light repair and reconnection. On the street lighting purchase, repurchase, and process of doing the conversion, there was an assortment of minor repairs and items that Eversource had presented as bills to the town. The town needed to pay those because you're the customer with Eversource, not Johnson. However, the costs were to be all inclusive. So again, we accounted for them and asked them to be compensated. So, which again, they did. Last one was just in the roll up for that 5305 was a roof leak in a section, damaged some carpet. That was a result of the work that was done there. So the replacement cost was compensated for 5305 total credit. The next section, which is really the bigger part of this change order, relates to the solar PV capacity. Now, the thing to keep in mind when the contract was originally signed to do solar across the buildings you see here, and actually one other, which was the maintenance public works facility, the structural evaluation, during the initial contract, the structural evaluations are very costly and time consuming. So they're done really during the construction and implementation. During the period of reviewing the structural efficacy of those roofs, it was identified that only a portion of the 262.6 original kilowatts that were originally intended for the Guilford Lake School were able to be put on that roof because the roof had structural limitations. It didn't allow that full capacity to be put there. They also determined that the public works facility, which was supposed to get 115.6, structurally failed. It was not safe to accommodate the solar once it was evaluated. So those couldn't be installed. In order to make back what they could make back, we then looked at other roofs and other options across the district to replace solar, for put more solar. There's limited options just based on roof conditions, based on shading, equipment on roofs. So we really tried to push to get it to make back as much as we could. So ultimately, in the Melissa Jones School, an additional 115.2 was added that wasn't originally there. So when all said and done, the original contract amount was about 1,000 kilowatts, approximately a megawatt, and the final installed is 814.8 kilowatts that ultimately was installed. We worked with Johnson Controls and negotiated based on the original contract cost per kilowatt. It was agreed that a credit in the amount of 515,414 would be applied to the contract, which is to account for the overall reduction of 147 kilowatt in the overall capacity. So because they couldn't install to the original contract amount, a credit is being applied to the contract to account for the fact that they couldn't meet the original contract capacity. And that's something that we worked through with Johnson Controls to determine what a fair credit value was based on what the original sell price in the contract was. So that really is the roll up of what change order 2 is doing with the project, and it reconciles really the remaining changes that are needed to occur to really finalize the project at this point.
Okay. Questions by the board?
I just have a question. Is that credit going to be, we're going to take that all at once, or that's over the life of the lease or the contract?
No, that's a straight sell price credit because they couldn't sell you that additional capacity. So yeah, it's not over the life of the project. It's a straight credit. Yeah.
All right.
There was also just, David, as you're probably familiar, there was a memo or a document from June 17th that was part of our package tonight, but the energy performance contract with payment summary tables. I don't know if there's anything regarding that you want to go over. I mean, this is a good summary of the credit and change order, but originally we had you on for last month regarding this particular communication. Is there anything you wanted to add regarding that? Although it does say very clearly the net credit to Guilford is 515,414 at the end of that, which is matching what you just presented. So anything you want to share with us regarding that summary from June 17th?
Yeah, and I have that document right here. So
Thank you.
I'm not displaying it unless you'd like me to, but I'm reviewing it just to make sure. So the June 17th memo actually goes a little bit further in that it also talks about some of the it talks about the reconciliation that we just talked about, but it also discusses some of the M&V or savings reconciliation that is occurring, and some of the delays to make back rebates. There's really not much to really talk about. The M&V year one and construction period reports have actually been published by JCI. And when you add in JCI has acknowledged that there were some shortfalls which are being reconciled. But again, that's really comes in the measurement and verification period part of this. And the change order is specifically just to reconcile the dollar sell prices, if that makes any sense. Yeah. So yeah, there's nothing, I mean, it's good information in the memo because it kind of walks you through how we got to the numbers that ultimately ended up in the change order, which is why we wanted to share it. But yeah, it really just kind of walks you through the reconciliation. Yeah.
Okay.
David, can I ask a question about measurement and verification?
Sure.
I think we had contracted for you to do that for us for 2 years. Is that right?
Right. So the way 3 years actually.
3 years.
So the way that works, and it's actually has been being undertaken, is that ultimately Johnson Controls is initially required under their contract to reconcile the measure at the end of the first year, year 1, year 2, and year 3. They are going to, in accordance with the contract, reconcile the savings and losses on the project to demonstrate whether or not they hit the contract target. We in turn are independently verifying all of that work and agreeing or disagreeing. And certainly I can certainly share the documents with you. There's a significantly lengthy document that went into the reconciliation of the original year 1 report, which based on the contract was actually, even though the project is technically not fully finished, actually came due because there was a contractual year 1 date of February 2019 in the delineated in the contract. So part of the work we did, which there's a lot of work behind this that came into the final reconciliation before they even published this M&V report that rolls up what the summaries are. So we've been very much involved in that final reconciliation and will continue to be for the first 3 years. They also did a construction period report. In other words, all the savings you've achieved leading up to the first year was something they also quantified. There's a separate report for that. And that's actually delineated in the M&V report. So there is a year 0 and year 1 report. We have fully reviewed it. And in its final form, we agree with its results.
I was curious when the 3-year period begins and ends, given some of the issues to finalize the project.
So what's interesting on this project was in most projects, the year 1 M&V starts at the substantial completion of construction.
Yep.
One of the things that happened in this project was that because Johnson had basically been very confident about their construction window or time. They actually, in the contract, there was an agreement, it was a written date, that the contract was signed in 2017, December of 2017, and that the M&V year one period would be a hard start date of February 1st, 2019. So what happened here, and it's part of the why there is shortfall shown that Johnson is, some of the additional solar and other things they've done here was to make back those losses. But at this point, they had to start counting your reconciliation on February 1st of 19, even though the project is technically not fully complete. That's a penalty to Johnson because the equipment's not fully installed. They're not getting the full bear of the savings of all the equipment, but the contractual dollar amount guaranteed, now the clock starts ticking. So they did, we held them to account to that date. And the M&V reports that have been published reflect an M&V year one date of February 1st, 2019 to January 31st of 20 as being the guaranteed monetary year one. That's actually not typical. Most contracts, the contracts will state that the clock doesn't start until the construction completion is done. In this case, I think really what happened here was the project got protracted out to a longer time period than Johnson expected it to be. So they agreed to that 2019 as being, will definitely be done by 2019, and the reality is they weren't. But the contract is the contract. February 2019 is the start date, and that is what is counting as the year one M&V. And
So
they're making good on that. Yeah.
As far as the ECG side, though, so have you already furnished us with the first year report, and we'll conclude our contract with you in January 31st, 22?
22, that's correct. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so we've already received one of your verification and measurement reports.
Yes, we've already, we reviewed and accepted the year one, which is the first one that's been published so far. The next, the year two will be coming soon because you got January, February, March. Yeah.
And I assume you've kind of tweaked it or made adjustments for the voltaic cells that we were unable to.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
there is an equitable adjustment of the fact that they didn't or couldn't install, and you are getting a monetary credit for those panels. So there isn't a reconciliation that's being done for the fact that there's a portion of the solar that isn't part of the project anymore because they simply couldn't install it. Yeah.
So year one, did they make the target? Did we, or we, I assume, made the target in savings?
No, they didn't. They fell short by approximately $68,481 when all said. Yeah. Their net total, when you add in construction savings, they just made it by 11,000 if you count the construction period, installation period. But as far as did they make it within the 1 year contractual period? No, they didn't.
Okay, but perhaps it makes sense with the project not wrapping up as it should, right? And it being having a complete year completed project. Okay, so maybe that makes sense.
Yep, that's exactly. They essentially they've incurred a penalty for the fact that not everything was implemented within the time frame that it was supposed to be. So the amount of savings that would have inured, had you been within the original time frame, they probably would have gotten over the goal line.
Okay, understood. So maybe second year they'll do better.
Yeah, I would expect so. Yeah, I would expect so. Because the equipment is performing. It's just as far as the effective time window, I think is what really mostly what hurt them here. But I think
what are your concerns going forward into the next year?
I'm sorry, say that again.
What are your concerns, David, going forward?
Well, I mean, going forward, I think we've gotten to the point where we've adequately reconciled the issues that have gone on the project. We're kind of down to the end now. The last of the solar is being installed and turned on. So I think you know, it was a long road, but I think we've finally gotten to a point where we're where we need to be with Johnson on this project moving forward.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go ahead.
perhaps Cliff can talk to this. There is considerable discussion and effort underway between, I know Dave DeMayo's on the line as well, about the possibility of redeploying some of the solar arrays that were originally scheduled for other buildings in town to Baldwin around a roof replacement. How would that impact this contract?
I apologize. You're asking me?
Well, Dave or Cliff could probably talk to that, and then relative to what the opportunity is that is in front of us. And then Dave, maybe you might talk to how we would readjust the contract with Johnson Controls.
Sure. No problem.
Correct. So we are taking a large percent of the solar that was unable to be put onto the Department of Public Works and looking at reprogramming it and putting it onto the Baldwin roof. And before we do that, because that roof is about 16 years old, it's in our best interest to obviously replace that roof. So I'm in the process of working with an architect to do that design for that replacement roof. And hopefully we'll have a number for the actual construction cost within about the next month for that, so that we'll know where we stand with the cost of the construction for just the roof itself. We expect it to be under $1 million, but we're not certain where. What we're hoping to do is basically we're extracting that piece out of, we'll call it phase 1 of the energy performance contract, and creating a phase 2 energy performance contract, which will just house that PV that wasn't installed. We already have the ZREC credits, which are good through next summer. So we want to maintain that. We're going to take both projects, the roof project and the PV project, put them both through the state grant process. So on the PV, we'll get 31%, 30 to 31% hopefully back on the PV, which we anticipate to be about $750,000 to $800,000, which will be funded out of the same source as the phase 1 energy performance contract. And then as far as the roof piece, we are not going to get a full 31% back because the roof is only 16 years old. Be 16 or 17 around in that area when we go to replace it. So it will be a modified amount coming back to us, you know, maybe like a 20%. But when we take all those pieces and add together, it still makes sense to do this project now. It benefits the town with the rebates, the reimbursement from the state and everything else. And obviously long-term we'll be generating a substantial amount of power at Baldwin through the PV system.
Thanks, Cliff.
Dave DeMayo or Dave Newman, anything to add to that? Or
No,
sound pretty detailed to me. So
yeah, no,
I was only going to add that the ZRECs do expire at the end of this year. So
we do.
even though we're not getting the full roof credit, as Cliff alluded to, the fact that the ZRECs would expire, the overall decision makes the best financial sense for the town at this point in time.
And just to clarify, David, I think you said this year, not 2021, but mid-year of 2022, the ZRECs expire, I believe.
Fiscal year. Fiscal year.
end of the
Correct.
fiscal
All
year.
right. Yeah, it depends how you're looking at it. So I didn't want somebody to get confused thinking we were going to lose the ZRECs at the end of 2021. So yeah, at the end of our fiscal year, correct.
I got another question for Mr. Newman. These services to verify and measure have obviously been pretty valuable. What's a rough figure for you to continue to do measurement and verification, perhaps throughout the life of the project?
It would, to be honest, with all the work we've done with you guys and for you guys at this point, if you guys asked us to keep doing it for a few more years, it's a service we do for everybody. So if we charge you, it would be a very small nominal fee if you went beyond the 3 years. The 3 years is kind of our standard. We do for everybody. Occasionally customers ask us to keep going. Honestly, we would probably just do it as a courtesy. It's just something we do for everybody.
Good.
Thank you. That's, I think that's been recorded for posterity. David, thank you very much.
Oh man, it was being recorded. Damn it. All right, shoot.
Not-
All right, well, now I gotta do it.
He's
Yeah.
not in sales, is he?
No, it's we've had a long and wonderful relationship with Guilford, and I'd be happy.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
That was a great answer, by the way.
You like that? Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought you'd like that answer.
Pretty good answer.
Exactly the right answer for the Board of Finance. Free.
Absolutely.
I know we have a big agenda tonight, so is there anything else for David? David, this was very, very helpful. And again, thank you for coming on a second, for a second go around.
Yeah. No, I apologize. I had to miss the first one.
No, this is great.
But
No, it's definitely worth it. And
glad you
appreciate
were
you
able to-
joining. I see that Aaron Alibrio is on also to back you up, I think, just in case.
They're just for support.
Yeah, but appreciate both of you being on, and of course, Cliff, for any supplemental information. So if there's nothing else, we can move on to the next agenda item. I just want to make sure we got all the questions covered. And sounds like we do. So Mr. Newman, Mr. Alibrio, and Mr. Gurnham, thank you very much. And feel free to stick around as long as you'd like.
All right, thanks.
Have a wonderful evening.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, gang. We're going to move on to item number 3, approve minutes of our regular meeting minutes of August 16th, 2021. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second,
Discussion, corrections, edits. I did not see any on my end, so anybody else?
Call the question.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
I'll abstain. I wasn't present.
Thank you, Mr. Beatty. Okay, moving on, item number 4, correspondence, standing building committee minutes. We have 2 sets. We have a standing building committee minutes of special meeting August 17th of this year and a regular meeting on September 7th. I did notice, I just made a note that it looks like the special meeting on August 17th was focused mostly on the Cox HVAC delayed start, as well as the high school stadium field and track. And those change orders, it seems like there were resolutions and good discussion on those. Certainly, if you have anything to fill in, Mr. DeMeo, that is fine. Because I did see in the regular meeting minutes that there was further discussion, but it seems like the standing building committee handled them. So anything you want to share or questions for the chairman? I'll let David have the floor first. Go ahead.
I really don't have anything else to add unless there are specific questions, really.
Okay. Questions for the chairman of the standing building committee?
yeah,
All right. Dave, oh, go ahead, please. Mr. King.
Go ahead, Mr. Gammon, go ahead.
actually, I was looking at the 2 sets of minutes hand in hand, and I wonder, David, if you could kind of summarize all these charges in the turf field adjustments. I've seen on the minutes of August 13th, it's what seems like change orders adding up to about $57,000. And on September 7th, change orders adding up to about $93,000. So that brings us to about a total of $150,000 beyond what was forecast. Now, I know it comes out of special funds, And I know by looking at the special funds report, I could see that there is leeway in there. There's enough material in there, but I'm just concerned about all of this spate of adjustments.
Well, sir, all except the material price increase for the track surface were all owner generated and owner requested items. And I think that should put it in perspective for you. Clearly, the Standing Fields Committee and Athletic Department at the high school requested changes to fencing, to additional paved areas, to turf on top of retaining walls and pedestrian walk areas rather than grass. They requested turf where there would normally be mowing along the edge of the track and throwing debris up on the track surface. So they were all owner generated change orders. So the engineering firm felt they were fairly priced, and that's what the town wanted. And as you stated clearly, there's money in the funds still. We're still on the plus side. And I believe I wouldn't expect to see any of the change orders unless they're owner driven.
I know that on the, if I could, the issues with the materials. Initially, there were some concerns regarding the timing of the orders and if they were done in a expeditious manner. And it appears from the special meeting that there were orders and there were purchase orders, I guess, that were made very shortly after the contract was signed, as opposed to several weeks after, which was a concern. But that seemed to be Standing Building Committee heard that and was fine with what they heard, which was it was a short time between the contract and the order.
Absolutely, we've initially rejected the change order request until we saw the timeline. We were concerned that almost 60 days may have passed from the time the submittals were approved for the track surface and when the material actually was ordered. And we received all the adequate timelines, and it was within literally a day or two after the submittal was approved by the engineering firm that the track surface material was ordered. And quite frankly, I think the H.I. Stone came to the table to us twice with all the information we needed. And quite frankly, these are unprecedented times, and the vendor supplier was essentially not going to deliver product unless they received the additional funds. In that case, we felt that it was appropriate to make the contractor whole and not hurt them. Just obviously, these are the times that we're in.
You bet. Could we switch quickly over to Save More? Could you explain that whole odyssey with Save More? With the,
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. The backstory is that Save More submitted a bid. The town issued a contract, which they signed. At the time that they signed, they also submitted a change order for additional time to complete the project, stating that from the time that the project was bid until it was actually awarded by the town and they received the contract, the lead times for the materials got pushed out. You know, that's a believable, that is what happened. It's a believable story. Initially, we didn't care for the way they went about executing that process, but putting feelings aside and digging into the nitty gritty of it, it made sense to stick with them to pay the additional $38,000 change order for the extended time, but also with Cliff's advice, feeling that the systems would make it through the winter. We are now doing that project next year at the start of school with a completion date just before school. We've got some pretty significant and detailed dates for start and finish. You know, the option that we had, though we were advised against it by town council, but the option that we felt we had was to reject all the bids and put it back out for bid. But we also felt at that point, with the material price increases that we're facing in the industry, we probably would have exceeded the $38,000 increase. We would have been in worse shape and still would have had to start the project when we did.
Right.
So ultimately, Save More is a good contractor. They've done a lot of work with the town. I think they could have handled their bedside manner on this case, you know, was a little questionable, but we got through that. And I think we've made the best decision for the town.
Good. Somewhere in these notes, looking at the 2 minutes, 2 sets of minutes together, I noted that bids only hold for 3 days.
That's,
You,
I'll let Cliff respond to that one, because I think that was his quote, but that is, anybody in the industry right now knows in construction that no one wants to hold a bid. Material prices, labor shortages, numerous issues, no one wants to hold a price. They want to know, hey, I'll get it now, but in 3 days, those prices may go up 20%. So, but that was Cliff's quote, and I chuckled when I read that, because it sounds sarcastic, but it is very true, and I'm sure Mr. DeMayo can tell you that.
Yeah, I mean, being in the industry, absolutely. If it's in a supplier's yard, the price is the price. But when the next delivery of material comes in, be it lumber, steel, or, you know, steel stud, sheetrock, insulation, whatever it is, if you could even get it, they can't tell you what the price is going to be until it arrives on their dock. So it's very unprecedented time, and you know, very difficult to manage. So that's the reality of it.
David, I got to ask you to clarify something. I really apologize. I might have missed it, but what was driving the delay? They didn't get some supply orders in quickly, or?
No, it had nothing to do with them getting the supply order in quickly. It had to do with the duration of time from the time the bids were received, analyzed by the engineers, approved by the standing building committee, approved by the Board of Finance, and a contract issued. And I'll tell you what, if it takes more than 2 or 3 weeks or a month to do that, you'll see price increases. We've just gone through 57 straight weeks of steel price increases.
wow.
But also impacting an extension just to get the work done, right? To do it over the next season, right?
That's correct. Yeah. So what we've done here is, just to clarify, we've given Save More the contract. We've given them the change order. They've ordered the material, so the material prices are locked in. And labor prices are locked in. So now we have a fixed contract, even though it's going to start in June of 2022. When the material comes in, the town has agreed to take the material and store it in whatever facility is available within the town. And at the time the contract starts, the material will be delivered to the school. So in light of the environment we're in, that was the best, I believe, reasonable approach to the project.
I wanted to ask too, the GHS turf field, looking at some of the change orders, and I think they're driven by the town, the school requesting the items. That, you know, they all seem like some pretty good items. Just in the small description, it seemed to be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Keep some grass off the field, you know, make a curtain around where you got to go around the fence with the mowers. But I was curious, those change orders, do they add up to about 120,000 or
150?
is it 150,000? It's pretty substantial.
Yeah, actually, change order 1 was 58,000. Change order 2 was 121,000. So there are some substantial change orders, and some of it's due to, you know, the cost, of materials in order to, accomplish, turf, the installation of a turf product on the 2 landings itself. If we use the same material they used for the field itself, it would have been close to $110,000. So we did a lot of due diligence trying to find a material that we could use that would hold up to high traffic, that had no maintenance, that would wear well. And we were able to get that from 110 down to 64,000. So that was a big ticket item. But in the long run, as we look at it, due to the reduced maintenance and wear and tear, and just the look of the field is going to be, well worth the money itself. And we went through that with Park and Rec and the Fields Committee numerous times.
Okay, and then just speaking a little bit to the escalated costs, it seems like this issue may keep coming up. I'm not really struggling, but I couldn't get a spare tire for my car. Actually, I got a flat tire, and because of COVID, there's not any inventory. So I've been driving around on a donut waiting for my tire to come. So I got the feeling this is going to come up, again and again as people are starting to recover and get their inventory up and the shortage of materials. Do you think we should have reached towards something more equitable, where maybe we split it with them? I realize that we're all sort of in the same boat to some degree, trying to deal with this situation, side effects of the COVID.
Split what with who?
Like for instance, these escalated costs of 27,000 for material. I think maybe in the first minutes there's kind of a thinking that maybe you wouldn't give them the 27,000. And then you kind of came 180 degrees on that in the next set of minutes. Was there maybe a middle ground to say, why don't we split this with you?
From our position, it was a straight pass through from the supplier. HI Stone did not put any markup on it, any overhead profit on it. And we felt that they were being fair enough with us that we didn't feel the need to beat them up anymore on this.
Yep. I just got the feeling it's going to happen again, like maybe we set the precedent that we're going to cover it, but maybe we should have.
Well, I think the important thing, the takeaway here is that as we go forward with projects, I think it's incumbent upon, all the entities involved to have a contingency. And I think Cliff does that pretty well. I sit in front of customers all the time like this, and it's unpredictable. And, I don't think there's any contractor out there that is trying to make money on their client based on cost increases. I think, at this point, I think they're just in recovery mode. So I think I think we're going to see some leveling in the industry after the close of this year. And I think the prices aren't necessarily going to come down, but they won't be as volatile. I just think we need to be diligent about how we build the budgets and the contingencies associated with them.
Understood. Yep.
And John, just another note, most of the materials for the turf field have arrived on site. So all the actual turf itself and the infill, if you drive by the high school, you can see we have a whole bunch of material that's stacked up over there. So we don't expect on this project to see another increase for that type of material, because the product's on site. Pretty much everything we need is there at this point.
Okay.
I have a question.
Veronica.
It's sort of along the same lines. Is there, and I don't know who to address this to, whether it's Mary Jane or the first selectman or whatever, but since these shortages are related to COVID, and is there any possibility of getting reimbursed from the American Rescue Plan? Is there any sort of recourse for the town?
That's a good question, Veronica. I haven't posited that to the legal beagles who are determining whether or not that is an appropriate use of COVID funds. It may or may not be based on the fact that the town had approved an expenditure regardless, and we had a contingency that accommodated increases in cost. But it's a good question, something we can certainly take a look at.
Might be worth asking or finding out about it. I mean,
Yeah.
we did our part in, like I said, in quoting and budgeting and going out to bid. The cost escalations were out of our control. So I don't know, might be worth looking into.
It is.
It's definitely is. And my only last comment to this is that what we're all learning in the industry, at least in construction, is if you don't have a good contingency right now going in and you don't act quickly, you are going to see increases. To go to Jonathan's point, we may very well see this again. I know several examples of projects right now going through a permitting process. And instead of it taking a regular month, it's taking 3 months. And within those 2 months, the project goes up 30%. Project stops, client says, you know what? I can't afford it now. You delayed it 2 months, now I can't afford it. So now I got to wait until the prices come down. And that's that's really the reality right now. And hopefully, as David said, it ends sooner than later, but I mean, this could be at least for another year, maybe more, that there's going to be some backlog like this and supply issues and costs, but hopefully not. Anything else for David DeMeo? All right. I think we'll move on. Spirited discussion as always.
Thank you all.
And thank you for
Thanks,
joining.
Dave.
My pleasure. Have a good evening.
Talk
folks.
soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Still item number 4 to pension committee minutes. Anything on pension committee minutes or the OPEB minutes?
Mike, I'd just like to add that the spreadsheet for the pension was recently added by Tracy. So if you kind of
Refresh.
come back in, refresh, you'll see it. I apologize for it not being there.
Okay.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Jonathan, while we're loading.
I just quickly went through the minutes, but I was curious. I think you said we had a $3.4 million, was it income on the fund over July, I think it was. And I was wondering, did that include 2.15 million of contribution?
Yes, that included the, yes,
just
that
skimmed it.
included,
Just
it
curious.
did. It included
Okay.
the town and the Board of Ed's contribution.
Okay, I thought for a second, what a staggering month, and thought I had been invested in it. Okay, that makes sense, though. Thank you.
Okay. Anything further on pension or the report?
I guess I'll just add that
Please do.
on September 1st, the town deposited $1.2 million into its OPEB trust fund. And starting next month, you'll be seeing a report similar to the pension funds report that we just loaded, which will show how that money is being invested and how well it will do over time.
And the meeting minutes will probably get a little longer as time goes on.
I have a comment about that. And I think first, I just want to say to Matt and the board and Board of Selectmen and so forth that, I need to really applaud the long-term thinking, because the OPEB fund is going to result in a better financial posture down the road. But I got a twist, and I just want to say again that the speed at which we fund that, does present a burden on the taxpayers. So, not only are they paying the current OPEB liabilities, but they're also paying that tax bill to build that fund up. And I think we need to be mindful of that.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah,
Jonathan,
yeah.
thank you very much for those comments. And I would pass along most of the credit to Mary Jane, who has been singing this song for 5 years since she got here, about taking a long-term look at the OPEB benefits. And we've finally realized that. Clearly, I think in the longer term, the taxpayers of Guilford over the next 25 to 30 years will be in a much better position relative to funding for OPEB benefits because of what we have done. Yes, there may be some pain in the intervening years, in a couple of the intervening years, but remember, we pay for OPEB benefits out of tax dollars, operating tax dollars today, as opposed to in the future when we're going to pay for them out of tax dollars plus earnings from our investments. So that's on a longer term, it will benefit the average taxpayer over the long term. It may not benefit people in the immediate 5 to 7 years, but it will benefit the community as a whole over the next 25 plus years. And if I'm Bob or Mary Jane, if I'm misspeaking, please correct me.
No, it's exactly what we need to do, and it's what didn't happen in Hartford for years, and we don't want to look like Hartford. So, this is exactly the right planning to do.
It also makes us more attractive when we go out for bonding because it shows up as a community that's fiscally responsible with its future liabilities. Saving the taxpayers money when we can borrow at more favorable rates.
Right.
I agree. There are knock-on benefits that are not specific to OPEB.
Yeah.
And very soon, we're going to be talking about an opportunity that we have that had we not have the opportunity to do some transfer, we would be burdening the taxpayers in a budget, in an operating budget. So
Well said.
But we're going to talk about that
Yep.
a little bit later on our agenda. So thank you, Jonathan, for bringing that up. Anything else on pension before we move on to our Board of Education? Okay. Item number 5, review and accept the report of expenditures for the Board of Education for August 2021. As always, we have, well, almost always, we have Linda Trudeau and Ted Sands. There he is. I'm looking at my screen going, oh, there he is. Okay. So Ted, all yours to present the Board of Education expenditures.
Okay, well, this is a little bit unusual this month because we have 2 fiscal years to talk about. First, let's focus on fiscal year 2020-21, which ended in June. We have some cleanup to do. Vendors, late coming in with bills, etc. So we have, in effect, kind of a stub period here. And the expenditures for the month of August for the previous fiscal year, the fiscal year 2020-21, were $83,721.07. And that means that the expenditures and encumbrances for the fiscal year were 99.92% of the budget as compared to 99.58% last year. We ended the year with an unexpended balance. That means money that we turned back to the town of $50,700.54. Given all the expenses that we were incurred due to COVID, et cetera, we are quite pleased to be able to turn anything back, much less $50,000. And you've got a copy of the warrants that went with this. There's nothing particularly unusual in the warrants, and this is the will complete this fiscal year. And relating to this is the fact that we had some relatively minor budget transfers. This is just to clean up as a result of what we incurred in August. So we transferred to the employee benefits medical line $3,000, the purchase services legal line $1,000, and the capital equipment line $6,000, which totals 10, and the 10 came out of supplies and materials textbooks. So with these, with this information and with these transfers, we put to bed the previous fiscal year. So why don't I stop now and take any questions with Linda's help with respect to the previous fiscal year, the 2020-21 fiscal year.
I have what may be a very big question regarding this. The memo on the front for 2021 seems to summarize everything you just said, obviously, but when you mentioned that the warrants, I don't know if it's just me, but the backup information for that is duplicative. Did I say that right? Oh, whatever. Of the 2021, 2022 information. Is that correct? So we don't really, so unfortunately, as I was looking at this a little bit later than I wanted to, before this meeting, I realized that we have 80, you mentioned the 83,000 plus amount of expenditures, but no backup warrant information. It looks like it was just, when the PDF was created.
It could be my mistake, Mike. I'd have to go back when I put it together.
And I apologize for not seeing this earlier and bringing it to your attention, but it was, I was going through all this not long before the meeting and noticed that, so.
Well, I'm a little surprised, Mike, because the copy I have was a printout of what went around from Tracy, and it's right here. It's 2 pages at the end of warrants. Obviously, since this is the cleanup, there's really not very much. Amazon takes up most of this page.
Yeah, no, and I agree. So first of all, it's not a lot, as we agree. Number two, again, usually, as we all know, we look at the warrants and we accept them, not approve them. So I don't, protocol wise, I'm not sure whether we should hold the vote on that until we get the warrant information, or we just accept.
Well, let me ask the other members of the committee. Am I the only person who got the warrant information off the Tracy email?
I didn't get it.
Ken, let me actually ask, Ken, did you get the hard copy package, right? Still?
Yeah.
And did you have the hard copies of the warrants for 2020?
No, I didn't get them.
You didn't have the hard copy, okay.
There should have been another warrant for $104,000. It was a page and a half.
Right.
Oh, I accept that, but we didn't see it.
What, so?
Is it? It's, Mike, I'm looking at the board pack, and it clearly, both of the 3-page summary for expenditure seems to be for fiscal year 21-22. As I'm looking at the total appropriations with an available balance of 53,701,000 on that first document, which clearly would be the expenditures through August. And there's nothing behind it on what I have here.
Yeah, I just, the front page is a good, the summary of everything, but then it's the same backup as in the other one. So let me ask, what's protocol wise or process wise, what if we were can we put something like this on the table I would think that we really can't, we need to close. So, or do we just accept based on what's the board's, I don't know.
I'm fine with the representations made by Mr. Sands and Ms. Trudeau.
I would hate to hold up the Board of Education on closing out this, and we're accepting anyway. Maybe as backup, we can just receive that. Again, just receive it for record, Tracy, tomorrow. And in the meantime, we could accept it so we don't hold anything up. Listen,
Yeah, I just looked
the Board of
back
Education reviewed this, so I don't think there's really a need that we need to sit there and scrutinize it. But I do think that we should see it for record.
Linda will have to send it to you, because I just looked back
Linda.
to what I got in my email, and all I have is 5 pages for the old fiscal year. So I don't have any other backup to that.
Okay.
So Linda will have to send that to you.
Is Is the
Well,
board,
so let's assume that Linda's going to send you the 2 pages or page and a half of the warrants.
right,
It's the whole document.
Yeah.
so if we could
Is
receive,
that, is that something, Linda, that you have that you can send to Tracy right now? You can upload it to
It's-
board pack.
What I'm trying to do right now is trying to send it. I'm sorry,
It's only 2 pages. You can review it really quickly.
that's very, actually good point.
Great,
Mary Jane. What we could do is we can move on to 21, 22, and then we could just do 2 motions after we go over this fiscal year. How's that?
Absolutely.
That works for me.
Yep.
All right, Mr. Sands, you're back up.
All right. Well, I'm happy to do that. So for the current fiscal year, the 21-22 fiscal year, expenditures for the month of August were $4,114,950.22. And the expenditures and encumbrances through the end of August were 13.93% of budget as compared to 13.42%. As you could imagine, this early in the fiscal year, these kind of differences are almost entirely timing of when we pay certain fairly large bills that get paid early in the fiscal year. I hope that you did get copies of the warrants for the current fiscal year, because this is several pages of this.
We do have that.
Okay. So I would welcome any questions with respect to the August expenditures or with respect to the August warrants.
Purchase services was indicated as higher due to timing. The 2 that I did notice, and again, it's very early, I think, if I remember correctly, dues and fees, 90% versus the 62 last year. I'm assuming dues and fees are paid pretty much right up front, beginning of the year, fiscal year.
Yes, they are.
Just to get them knocked out. That's usually when they're due. And then security was at 92% versus 26 last year. That one I was wondering about more. So other than that, I don't have any other questions, but what security, that popped up high already.
That is. Can't remember the name of it. There was a purchase for.
And you could always get back to us.
I believe that was the renewal for the visitor software.
Okay.
Which wasn't done until later last year.
Okay.
One question.
Double check it.
Why is there no separate sheet for COVID in 21-22?
Because we had very limited purchases so far. We haven't really bought a whole lot of items. It's mainly the hand sanitizer, the storage trailers, and a few other small items. So I haven't broken them out. What I am planning on doing is once we start spending the funds for the ESSER grants, I will do a separate report for the ESSER grants that will have detail of how those funds are being spent. But as far as using Board of Ed budget for COVID expenses, it's been minor to date.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, we're not employing all the unanticipated labor that we did last year. I mean, we don't have the bus monitors and we don't have these extra people for the dining areas and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So the COVID so far, and we've bought all the dividers and, you know, plexiglass and all that, and the tents. So that really it's just some things like the hand sanitizers and those are not big ticket items yet.
Yeah, that makes sense. You're tracking, the point is that, Linda, you're tracking it, but you're just not going to track it as part of the budget, but you're going to track which expenses could go towards the grant.
Yes.
Perfect. Jonathan.
Ask about the custodial line. It looked like we're doing just better than last year. So I was just curious what's driving it.
The custodial supplies or custodial salaries? I'm sorry, Jonathan.
Oh, I'm sorry. I should have clarified. Custodial supplies. What is it, like page 3?
In the beginning of last year, there was a lot of extra purchases under custodial supplies that got moved out later on that were COVID related. So I think you'll see those levels even out a little bit later on.
Extra cleaning for precaution.
Right, but then we moved the expenses in previous months when we started really separating everything a little bit more.
Okay, I mean, I was just curious, but good to save from last year. Always good to save.
Yes.
And you do have a line item there under supplies, COVID supplies.
Yes, but that's the only line that I'm tracking anything in right now.
Understood. Yeah, got it. Okay, good.
I know it's early, but I don't think this may be the first full week of school, but has there been any change in the use of the dining services that you've noticed?
Actually has been. There have been some increases in lunches and meals even over the first few days. There have been changes to the breakfast, and so breakfast in some of the schools has picked up already. So even in the first few days, we have seen an increase. Now it's hard to compare it to last year because last year was just so abnormal.
Right.
But the counts that we're seeing so far have been very good and increasing daily.
That's encouraging. That's great news.
Yes.
It also could be partially due to the fact that the new dining services director has revised the menu and put some additional things in that the students seem to be responding to. So as Linda said, surprisingly favorable trends in that area so far. It's early. It's early.
Right.
I think your new person is suggesting that we may be increasing revenue in that area by $140,000.
Yeah, well, that's the change in reimbursement. Yes.
Okay, anything else for, give me a second here, for 21-22. And hopefully you all saw that we have a new loaded document.
Mr. Ailes,
Yes, go ahead.
your security question was the Stopware software that you will see on the warrant. And it's the visitor software that does the checking of visitors when they come in the building. And that's the increase in security. And it's the timing of that payment this year versus last year.
Okay.
I just couldn't remember the name and I apologize for that. It just
Great.
I drew a blank on it.
Okay, got it. Thank you. And thank you for the August warrants. It is short. You were right.
Mostly Amazon.
Mostly Amazon.
And again, I know it's early, but tuition, any surprises so far?
No, surprisingly not. We looked at counts for tuition, and from what we had budgeted, our counts are down. Plus, we had budgeted some additional funds. No, I can't find my notes. So we haven't touched our additional funds that we've set aside, and our counts are below what we budgeted. So right now that's trending very well. We've also had a few students where Jason Scanziano was able to negotiate a settlement agreement, which was under what we had budgeted. So we've saved some money on some of even the individual students from what we had budgeted. So hopefully that trend will continue as well.
But I should caution you that this
can
is
change.
early days, and the tuition line has always been the most volatile line that we have in the budget. So we're not promising anything on this one.
How about
one
enrollment?
or two students moving in that we didn't know about can knock this line flat.
Understood. I was just looking to get a snapshot of where we were today.
It's as favorable as I can remember.
How about enrollment? We were anticipating larger enrollment numbers because we thought people held out their kids last year. Did that come to fruition this year? Do we have larger classes coming in?
Yes, the kindergarten class is substantially up from last year. That was, we expected that parents would hold back children. And that seems to be what happened.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the kindergarten class is every bit as big as we expected.
Thank you.
The official enrollment report is due for October 1st. So once that is completed, we'll provide a copy of that for your next meeting. So we should have those numbers for your next meeting.
Yeah.
The full enrollment for the district.
Great. Thank you. Quick question before we go into motions. Just to confirm, the August 2021 warrants is the 104,349.52 amount, and in the summary, it's the 83,721.07. Which one are we approving? Are we approving the one in the summary or the one in the warrants? The number.
Approving the expenditures. The difference is there was some expenditures that were moved to grant funds.
Okay, thank you.
You approve the expenditure amount, not
Okay,
the grant amount.
just wanted to double check, that's all. Okay, thank you.
I had one question.
Go ahead, Ken.
I'm looking at the Board of Ed's minutes of August 9th, where there was a series of transfers from and to, and the transfer out of $540,000 out of purchase services. It's understandable why, but is there enough money in there in the 21-22 budget to cover any of our needs for purchase services? In other words, is this 540 a pure savings?
So a lot of these savings that were realized in purchase services were from all the credits that we received from electricity. Let me get that other report. So I believe that there is enough in purchase services to cover our current expenses. We don't anticipate huge overages in those lines, so there should be plenty of funds to cover everything that we need for purchase services for 21-22.
Thank you.
Anything else for Mr. Trudeau or Mr. Sands? Excellent. Okay, so we will have, we'll do two motions together, well, separately, but at the same time here. We'll do, I'll entertain a motion to accept the report of fiscal year 2020-2021 expenditures of the Board of Education for the month of August 2021 in the amount of $83,721.07.
So
moved. Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, recusals? Okay. And then we'll move on to a motion to accept the report of fiscal year 2021-2022 expenditures of the Board of Education for the month of August 2021 in the amount of $4,114,950.22.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions, recusals? Excellent.
Thank you.
Linda, Ted, thank you very much.
Thank
Very much
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you both for all you've done.
Agreed.
Great.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Moving on to item number 6, review and approve a report of expenditures for town government for August 2021. I have a feeling that Mary Jane may want to start out with revenues, but if you don't,
Really?
that's up to you. You
We
want
have to like, change it up every once in a
you
while.
want to switch it up, that's up to
Surprise
you.
you guys.
It's always good to see what came in first, right?
That's right.
All right.
So as of the end of August, we are 16.6% through the fiscal year. Hard to believe it's already September, but you'll see that we have brought in 40.6% of our revenue as compared to 42.2% as of last year. You'll note that tax collection is down from last year. The Board of Selectmen had a question on that this morning. I do have the tax collector working on putting something together for everyone, but she does feel that delinquencies are going to be slightly higher this year. She will be sending out delinquency notices and hoping to work with people, but in her opinion, she feels that they might be higher, but we're working on something that we'll be able to get to you guys, because tax bills were due by September 1st. So we want to make sure that we account for all of that and see if maybe it was just people paying the last day or not. So we'll get something out to you this week once we have a better answer for you, more comprehensive. Otherwise, most of our departments are doing pretty well. I'm happy to report that I am working better at meeting my budget for interest rate this month, these 2 months. Still not quite there, but I'm better than last year. So giving myself a kudo for that. I really don't have anything else significant to note unless you have any specific questions.
I do not.
Mary Jane, if you got a minute here.
Go
So we
ahead.
just got a little windfall from JCI, and I'm wondering, how does the accounting work for that $500,000?
I'm not sure I can comment on that yet. I'd have to, it's kind of the first I've heard of it tonight too. So
Okay.
I'll have to be working with JCI and putting that through. I'm not quite sure how we're accounting for that at this point.
Will that flow into this budget or the budget that we've just closed out for?
It would have to flow into this budget.
Okay, you have to take it as it's realized, or?
Yeah, we're past the time where we go back. Our auditors are already here this week.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's a little bit early on a lot of these, of course.
Yeah.
Just a couple months in. Parks and Rec was at 27 last year, 27%. They're at 18%, but they're still trending higher. So are they starting to rebound in terms of fees and was it rentals on the community center, and are they starting?
Program.
Yeah, programming. It seems like they're on par with the year, but they're lower than last year.
So programming is not part of this budget. That's separate. So that's something else. So they've only brought in $577 in room rentals so far. So it looks like they're doing a little bit, but certainly not as much as they would normally do.
It appears that it's, now that I'm looking at the details, pavilion rental is up higher, which would make
Correct.
sense.
Out,
with the
right.
weather.
Outside facilities are doing
Yep.
well. Look at the golf course. Once again, our golf course revenue is higher than you would have seen that, 3 and 4 years ago. People are still doing outdoor activities.
Right. Got it.
It's also encouraging to see planning and zoning at a higher pace than they were last year.
Yeah, our land use offices have been very busy.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else on revenue? All right, we shall move to expenses then.
So, whoops, I just lost everybody's face. Expenditures as of the end of August are at 24.2% overall with the Board of Education compared to 20.5%. But if you break down the two entities, you'll see that the town is pretty much on par where it was last year, 40.9 right now as opposed to 39.8. And the Board of Ed is higher, and they discussed that already earlier this evening. So otherwise, our departments are sort of right where they should be at this point. And again, I really don't have anything substantial to report, good or bad. So if you have any particular questions, I'll gladly entertain them.
I noticed that Public Works was down in expenditures, and I wondered, is that just a timing issue? They haven't bought the materials that they need? I think they were down in winter road work.
Yeah, it's really just a timing issue when they put out purchase orders and how much. At the beginning of the year, most of the expense or a lot of the expenses tied up in purchase orders, and so it's just a matter of what they have in there. That makes a big difference.
Could it be possible that insurance is running lower, or that's got to be timing, huh?
Yeah, it's timing mainly of when the bills come in and we get them out. I think we did have a reduction in some of the areas, but I don't think you're going to see anything too significant.
And then is human services, I think it was, is that kind of normal, a little bit higher this year?
Well, human services, I like to see that at 100% by now. Those are all the donations we make.
Yeah,
to the
those are the
nonprofits.
donations, right? Okay.
Yeah, so it's
we
a
might as
matter
well
of,
make it at the beginning. Okay.
yeah, we do expect them to get the requests in at the beginning of the year. So they actually did better this year than last year, because we like it to be 100%.
All right, one more capital. I just don't understand it, but it probably just because we had the payment hit this month or early month or something.
Well, capital, as you can see, we got
Encumbrances.
500,000 just in encumbrances alone. So, that makes up half right there of the overall appropriation for capital. So
But how
again,
come so fast compared to last year? Sorry, I just didn't understand that.
well, if you remember, I did speak at one of the
Oh, is this from the
recently. Yeah, we
I'm
held
sorry.
off on capital expenditures last year because of COVID. This time around, kind of let the department heads go ahead and place their orders. So,
Okay.
yeah, we always
Not
use
what I was,
capital to mitigate. We always use capital to mitigate the budget when we have a potential of a problem with our budget. And because of COVID, we kind of held off a little bit. Things that needed to be purchased were purchased. We didn't hold off everything, but many of the departments held off just even on their own.
Okay.
I don't have anything else.
I was thinking of different capital. That's operating capital, right?
This is operating capital.
Yep.
Mhm.
I was,
Right.
okay.
Anything further on expenses before we move on to warrants? Special fund warrants. I don't see anything that I have a question on. Regular warrants, weekly warrants, any warrants? Going once, twice. Medical. So this isn't, so this is interesting. When was the last time we saw that kind of amount? It's been a
Well,
long time.
if you look in July, it's zero. So the August number represents 2 months
It does.
at this time.
It does, okay.
Mhm.
All right, so if you average those two out, then it's not bad at all.
It's still low, yes.
Okay. All right.
Is there still I know when we talked about this a bit last year, there was a sense that people may have been holding off on submitting claims or something like that. And any sense as to any change in that analysis or no?
Nope, my crystal ball is as cloudy as it was 18 months ago. When we talk about the potential transfer out of the medical fund, you'll see that I am recommending that we hold back 3 months of expenses just in case, because we do not know what effect COVID may still have on our medical fund. And we want to be sure that that money is there in case it's needed. But it is just, it's just too hard to say. None of the consultants or the professionals or anyone really knows what people have held off. So it's all conjecture at this point.
Yep.
But
Thanks.
very possible people are weary of going to the hospital with, an infectious disease.
Right. And that's our supposition, Jonathan. We're kind of making that assumption because we haven't met our claims numbers. Whether or not there's a big rush at some point, that's what we don't know.
Hospitals are doing elective surgeries now. I'm not even sure about that. Yeah, they returned it.
And and we have the July and August numbers. There's no claims at all that are going towards catastrophic. We just don't have that information yet.
That information was unfortunately unavailable
Okay.
As of yet. I don't understand. Something happens on July 1 at Anthem. I think they have such an influx of adjustments and changes, and that they kind of hold off reporting July. So that's why July had nothing and everything came in August. But I tend to have difficulty getting data in July and August. So I'm hopeful that for the next report, you will see that.
It'll catch up. Yep. Okay. Okay. All right. Anything further on medical, warrants, expenses, revenue before we move on? Okay. I will go ahead and entertain a motion to approve the report of expenditures of the town for the month of August 2021 in the amount of $3,836,800.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions or recusals? Okay. Mary Jane, thank you. But you're still kind of up, so.
I know.
Item number 7, consider and take possible action to authorize transfers from unassigned fund balance and the medical fund balance as of June 30th of 2021. I know that on our board pack, Mary Jane, I know you're going to go through this in more detail, but we are going to be discussing and taking possible action on fund balance transfers out of unassigned fund balance and the medical fund balance. And there's also an additional memo from let's see, is this from the Board of Selectmen or just a notification? Yes, it is. It's from First Selectman to us regarding the Board of Selectmen's meeting that they took the action to vote unanimously to transfer the amounts that Mary Jane's going to go over now. So rather than, I could read the memo, but Mary Jane, I think you're going to go through it in detail. So unless you'd like me to read the memo, you can summarize it if you'd like.
Certainly, I will summarize it, and Matt and I are going to kind of tag team this because this is a dual project between the two of us. So I'm going to let him answer some of the questions and explain some of the items. So first of all, I just note that these are unaudited numbers for June 30, 2021. I'm showing a balance in the unassigned fund balance of just over $13 million. Per our policy, we are holding 10% or about 10.5 million of the budget should remain. The difference between what we have and the amount that we prefer to hold is about 2.5 million. The items we are going to discuss with you this evening total $1,236,512 in total. The first one is technology. Last year, we came to you with a long list of items that we were looking to do technology-wise because of COVID, and also just enhancements specifically to some of our Munis modules. And we did use a small amount of that money last year as we moved forward with some COVID-related enhancements to the way we do things at Town Hall. I am looking for an additional $150,000. We have started the project of putting in the capability at the community center for you and other department and other committees to have Zoom meetings, and that cost is quite considerable. In addition, the land use offices at Town Hall South are revamping their entire permitting program. We did ask for money in the amount last year. We have a somewhat more robust work that we're doing over there, and so there are additional costs. So we are requesting an additional $150,000 into that technology fund to help with those projects.
Can I ask a question real quick about technology?
Yes.
When you talk about the building, planning and zoning, the building departments, I would assume that update and the technology they're doing is to expedite the process.
Correct, Mike. It is. It
is
is.
The point we were making before about not taking 2-3 months to go through the process in hard copy paper, but to actually be using technology to expedite.
Mike, I will admit there are some applications that do take 2 to 3 months, but that's because they have to hit.
They're complicated.
They have to go to inland wetlands. They have to go to zoning, board of appeals, et cetera.
Of course.
But yes, the idea here is to provide a full self-service for our community, so that you can sit in the comfort of your office at home and fill out a permanent application without ever having to come into our building. And then stay and be updated on that as it progresses through the various stages at our facility. We did wind up making a determination that we wanted to go with a product that was a little bit more expensive than we originally had budgeted. But the reason we did that was it was a product that was offered by Munis, which is our financial transaction system that runs basically everything that you guys see on a monthly basis. So this is a fully integrated system with Munis, which did cost us a little bit more than we had originally anticipated. As to the second piece, the technology that's going to be installed at your traditional meeting room at the community center will have a large screen on the back wall from where you are sitting, as well as an additional screen on the side. For those who are in the audience, can also participate in hybrid meetings and see folks on the screen. There will be a series of microphone arrays dropping from the ceiling But suffice to say, you guys will be able to conduct hybrid meetings. Not only you, but I think there are at least 3 other major boards that utilize that facility. Park and Rec Planning uses that one, and there's at least one more, maybe Zoning Board of Appeals use that room as well. So that will now be accessible to the entire community for use in hybrid meeting presentations. So those are, and then one last one is we are planning on spending some more funds on cybersecurity. One of the things that you will hear a little bit later in this presentation as to why we're asking for money on coastal resilience is that in our calls with the rating agencies relative to our bond funding and our then original bond funding for a couple of small issues, and then the major refunding, which was done last week, or the $21 million worth of refunding that we did. It was highlighted. We were asked repeatedly what we were doing, and we were complimented on what we've done with dedicated funds for things like coastal resiliency, but also we were able to satisfactorily answer their questions around what we're doing on cybersecurity and what we were planning to do. So those 2 areas were highlighted in our ratings calls.
And Mike, I'd just like to add one more thing regarding the new products at Town Hall South. We've also purchased a workflow module for that, so that part of the reason why one permit can take so long is it's got to touch so many hands over there at land use. The building inspector needs to look at it, planning and zoning. They all need to look at it. This way, all the documentation will be in the computer. When it's my turn to look at it, and not necessarily me, but if I'm the building inspector and it's my turn to look at something, I'll get a notification on my computer and I'll be able to take care of it right then and there, instead of people having to figure out where in the process a permit might be. So hopefully all of these improvements will make it easier on the user and also easier on our staff.
Thank you for the detail. Sorry to interrupt. Oh,
no problem.
I'm assuming we're going to
Okay.
disaster relief
Tell me that
next.
we're going. Then the next item I have is to request $300,000 for disaster relief. And this is really a request that I'm making for items going back to Irene and Sandy, and even before that. Ever since I've been here in Guilford, I've been working on these projects, trying to finalize them, close them out, get the money that we can from FEMA, and move on, because we've got dozens more now on the plate. So I've made a promise to myself that I'm going to close out all of these old ones this year, so that we can concentrate on the new ones. We have about $285,000 in these old disasters of money that the town still thinks they may get from FEMA. Odds are most of that money will not come our way at this point. If we haven't been able to prove we need the money by now, it was worked on before I was here. I've been working on it all this time. It is just my assumption that it's time to move on and just close these out if we have to. So the max that I'd be looking for is about 285,000-ish from this, but so I've requested 300,000. This is exactly what we would have had to do step by step if there were projects that were deemed non-reimbursable. We would have had to use undesignated fund balance. So I'm just putting this on the table and making you aware that that is what I'm doing this year.
Okay. Any questions on that? Okay.
Okay,
So-
I'm gonna, oh, go ahead.
Are we gonna have some discussion on these transfers?
Yeah, we're still going through them. We're on
Number 3.
we're on number 3 now.
Projects.
All right.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna toss the ball to Matt for facilities.
All right, there are really two programs that we're looking to do with facilities. One is the 52 Church Street facility where which we purchased, which is adjacent to the community center. We purchased that a little over a couple of years. I think it's about a year and a half, maybe a little bit more than that. We've run into some challenges relative to the Historic District Commission's agreement in terms of the appropriate use of that facility. Some of the funds in here are going to be to hire an architectural historian to render an opinion on the historical significance of that building as a mid-century modern. Because if we will be required to retain that building in some form or fashion, even if it is the original building minus the additions that were put on over the years, it will significantly render that property much less useful for the additional parking that's needed for our community center, particularly as it relates to our seniors program. The other major piece of this is for the rehabilitation of the driveway, the old Thane building at 50 Driveway, which is adjacent to the Public Works building that we purchased a while ago, which is now going to house Park and Rec's administrative offices for their buildings and grounds. As you may or may not recall, we are renting a trailer for office space and bathroom facilities for the Park and Rec maintenance crew over at the Public Works facility. Additionally, we'll be looking to do some redesign in that building to accommodate additional storage for some of the things that are currently being stored over at the old Public Works facility. I think some of you have heard, and Bob knows the story on this one, I think pretty well. That's a piece of property that often looks like, I say it looks like my basement. There's a lot of stuff there that we hope we may use at some point. And I wind up getting a dumpster every couple of years and getting the stuff out of there. But not all of the stuff over at the old Public Works facility is literally going to be thrown out. But there is an opportunity for us to move some of that over there. So those are a couple of the areas where we're going to look to apply some of the money for the facilities projects.
Oh,
All right, Jane, you want me to take transportation plan as well?
Yes, I do.
As you may recall, the Guilford Safe Streets Task Force was granted an allocation of about $350,000 a couple of years ago. They blew through a large portion of that, over $225,000 with a consultant that is about to provide their final report sometime this fall relative to how to make Guilford safer for pedestrians, walkers, cyclists, and drivers. You may have, I don't know if anybody saw the demonstration projects they did around the green relative to shortening crosswalks and creating traffic calming techniques. They did one on the corner by the library. They did a shortening of the crosswalk in front of Town Hall. I think that was specifically designed to attract my attention, but they also did a traffic calming project up on New England Road, coming off a long hill as it relates to going up to the high school, a very, very dangerous intersection. So they're going to be coming forward with a series of short, intermediate, and long-term recommendations for increasing public safety throughout our community. And owing to the fact that the consultant for that project cost more than we originally anticipated it would, the amount of money that's going to be available for the quick builds or the demonstration projects of the formal projects has been limited. So that's largely what that money is for the transportation plan. I'll also take the next one, Mary Jane. Coastal resilience, as I mentioned earlier tonight. One of the things that we got huge kudos on from the rating agencies, being a shoreline community and the inevitability of climate change and sea level rise is going to impact the coastal community. Many of you are familiar with the coastal resilience plan that we put in place 8 to 10 years ago and completed 3 major projects. I have Veronica smiling. She was part of that group that approved that project years ago. But we successfully completed 3 of those projects, and we have been commended by the rating agencies for being forward-looking and putting money aside for coastal resilience projects. What you may recall is the way we did that the last time was we issued bonds to pay for those coastal resilience, those 3 projects, the coastal resilience projects. This is an opportunity to get ahead of the curve, take taxpayer money off the table in future years by reducing our need to go back out for bonding on those projects. Mary Jane, you get road projects.
We have a request from our town engineer for $300,000 for specific road projects. They include the design of Goose Lane, the replacement of guardrails and other items on Clabbard Hill Road Bridge, and drainage and culvert improvements throughout town. So she has identified $300,000 worth of road projects that she is requesting the funding for.
Right, and Mary Jane, what I might add is that those requests would show up in future capital budgets.
The last item, the last item is $36,512. If you remember last month, I came to you with some items to carry over from unused funds for items. This is the balance in a purchase order for salt, for road salt for the winter. And it was a miscommunication between the Public Works staff, and that purchase order, instead of being held over to the new year, was canceled. So I had a meeting with Tom Fillion this week, and we were going over what he had available, and he mentioned a purchase order, and I didn't have it. So this money is the balance in that purchase order that I'm requesting be put into carried in force for Tom specifically to use for salt for the upcoming winter season.
Well, I might add, one of the challenges with salt is there's a shortage of salt providers in the state of Connecticut. One of the previous suppliers had access to the port facilities in New London. The state basically took that facility back. So we have some challenges relative to salt supply. I'm not alone, and Guilford is not alone in the challenge in terms of identifying sources. And then price sensitivity has gone up dramatically, not unlike a lot of other things, but it's largely related to supply. Anybody, I remember my Echo 101, supply shortages usually means price increases. So carrying this forward, I think, is essential for us to make sure that we can, if we can get the materials, we'll be able to afford them for the upcoming winter season.
Thank you for, Mary Jane, were you going to say something else?
I was just going to say that, thank you for listening to us. That concludes our request from undesignated fund.
Okay, so once that amount of unassigned fund balance gets committed, what I'm seeing here just very quickly, there's still an amount of about the same amount, about 1.26 million. That's over the 10% policy that we've instituted on what we need to have in the budget for unassigned, or should
Correct.
have. Yeah. So this is not draining it by any means. It's utilizing it for long-term costs down the road.
Right.
The one question I had, and then I'll open it up, is, and I know there's a number of committed funds that we have. One that I didn't hear or see, and I think I'm just looking out for the future, is reval. How do we stand with the amount that we have for reval coming up in the near future?
So Matt and I did discuss that before we put this together. We did put money away last year for reval, and we have just over $100,000 left of that money over and above the contract that we have for the current reval. So although we might be looking for funds maybe in the next couple of years, we felt it wasn't necessary to put any more aside for that right this moment. Although we will definitely need it, and we would use it. And if you choose to put some there, it certainly would go a long way.
I just remember the days of revaluation being in the budget for, I don't know, what is it? Matt, I can't remember the exact number,
yeah.
but it was like 50 to 70,000 every year to build up the amount, and it was in our operating budget.
Right.
And at this point, we don't have it in our operating budget because
Right.
we've utilized it as a committed number from unassigned.
Correct. So the contract was about round numbers, $350,000.
Okay.
So we do have 100,000 left just for any contingencies or anything we might need to do. The assessor feels that that's sufficient, but we will need another round of money, obviously, for
Down
the
the road.
next one. Mhm.
Okay, great. Okay, that was my question. I'll open it up. Questions, discussion to the board?
Just a quick question about procedure. Is this the Board of Selectmen informing us that the decision has been made?
No, the Board of Selectmen is recommending that you approve these transfers.
There we are. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, I'm gonna jump in then.
Go ahead.
So I've said this before. I feel like this pattern has got to stop. And I feel like what we've got here is a pattern of we're overtaxing. And these are some back of the envelope calculations. So I would invite Mary Jane maybe to dig into them. But I'm showing that in 2018, we had a 1.2 million surplus. In 2019, we had a 2 million surplus. In 2020, we had a 3.2 million surplus. And now in 2021, we've got approximately a 1.4 million surplus. This money pours in to a surplus that's in the medical account, and it pours into the unassigned balance because we have money at the end of the year. And then this money gets spent on these pet projects that the taxpayer never even gets any say on, and none of the money gets returned to the taxpayers. And I just think this pattern's unfair. And while the projects might have various merits to them, the way this pattern is working is just not fair to the taxpayer. What I would prefer is that they knew about the spending upfront, give them a chance to vote on it. They approve the spending, so be it. And not always run these surpluses, spend the money on the back end, and never return any money to the taxpayers.
Okay. Anyone else on the board? Discussion?
I think the technology aspect, we touched on it earlier in the meeting with the standing building committee, talking about the changes in prices that the delays happen. And we touched on it earlier when Mr. Chairman and Mr. First Selectman were talking about it as well. But those are real, the speed at which a building permit goes through the land use offices. And I'm not talking about an application before the Planning and Zoning Commission. I'm talking about somebody looking to build a house or put an addition on or something like that. And the pace, if to the extent that the town can improve its technology to speed that pace up, I think has profound impacts on the very taxpayers that Mr. Trotta was just advocating for. Their ability to get things done quickly, to get to lock in at prices and be able to afford the projects on the budget they've identified are real issues that this technology can improve. And I know that particularly over the last 18 months with the COVID, the health department in particular has been extremely burdened with taking care of health issues while attempting to address sanitation issues. And they're doing the best they can, but to the extent that we can help them streamline this process, it's going to be better for the contractors, our taxpayers, and the people who live in the houses or the offices that are being built while all these processes get completed. So that's my take on technology anyhow.
If I could just add something. Yeah, that's just one aspect of the requests. I don't know, I take, Jonathan, I will say that I appreciate your comments. We all do. We always talk about the spirited discussion we have about unassigned fund balance. Whether we utilize funds now or put 1.236 million in an operating budget, it's either now or it's later. So these are things that we always talk about, that as leaders of this town, we have opportunities to mitigate the amount of tax burden that we have on our taxpayers. So this is doing pretty much what you're asking for it to do. I will take a pretty major exception to the word or the phrase pet projects. I don't know if our first selectman, board of selectmen, board of education, or anybody else would appreciate pet projects. I didn't hear anything here that's, hey, you know what, we'd like to do this because, we'd like to do it. I hear a lot of things here that are going to make Guilford better for taxpayers. It's going to improve systems. It's going to improve infrastructure. That is my opinion. I don't want to speak for anybody else, but when you said pet projects, I have 3 hairs left in my head and they stood up. And I appreciate what you say. I truly do. And you've been saying this for years. I don't think any of us, we've gone through this discussion numerous times, and rather than argue it, I'll just tell you that I have a different opinion. And so I think this is smart use of funds that we'd be asking for later anyway. And with that, I will end my points on this particular expenditure or this transfer.
I did try to articulate that the projects do have some merits, as they're described and as they stand. So maybe that was an unfair choice of words, pet projects. But the over, and then I don't feel like we're rating the unassigned balance at all. I agree that 10% unassigned balance is a conservative position that would be conducive with AAA rating. I just feel like in many of these tax years, the surplus is larger than the tax increase itself. And, we're never returning the money to the taxpayer, or maybe going forward, trying to do a better job to hone our estimate for expenses so that we are not, giving the taxpayer such a large increase, because we realize that we can cover expenses without the increases.
I would just add
Never
one more thing.
money flow back to the taxpayer. Admittedly, you're saying it's going to flow back to them in new spending, but most of my constituents would rather have a smaller tax bill, use the money on their own.
I would just remind you what our mill rate increase was the last 2 years. Pretty minimal. Especially compared to what we were bringing in and what we were spending in COVID. So that would be one other thing I would add. We're looking at low mill rate increases and tax increases the last 2 years. So,
but perhaps unnecessary, completely unnecessary increases.
Now or later.
I have a question.
I'm not sure I believe that now or later argument, though, because we budgeted for X amount of dollars, increased taxes by, let's say, $2,008,374 in 2020, and then we took back in $3.2 million. We didn't have to raise the taxes at all. It wasn't a matter of now or later. They just would have saved that much in taxes. And then we wouldn't be thinking at the end of the year, oh, what do we do with this windfall surplus?
I know Veronica can say something, and then Mr. Howard, go ahead.
I have a question on disaster relief. Mary Jane, were these expenses that the town didn't get back from FEMA? So we've already expended this money and we're making these accounts whole. Is that correct?
You're on mute, Mary Jane.
Sorry, I know my family's home, so I was just putting it on mute in the background. Yes, this is money that was spent, like I said, long before even I was here.
Well, I was around for Irene and the town was devastated, so
right.
I'm sure we did spend the money.
Right. So, and we did receive hundreds of thousands of dollars already. This is just the residual for, it might be
There's stuff
50,000 from one disaster, 100,000 from another, it's all the small residual things that FEMA initially was saying that we could not be reimbursed, and doing some last minute final, wheeling and dealing with them, trying to get as much as we can. And so this would close out a receivable that we have on the
that's what I want.
books. Right. And I'm trying to get every dollar we can. But it's been many years for some of these disasters, and the likelihood of getting all of it back is getting slimmer and slimmer as I move forward.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, please.
Jonathan, I like Mike, always appreciate your perspective and going forward, and always willing to engage. I do have a question for you, though. One of the comments you made was you think the taxpayers and the voters should have an opportunity to weigh in on this. So which of these projects that we just described, or which of these expenditures that we just described, would you be willing to support next year during the budget season to put to the voters to say, let's go ahead and spend these money in addition to the $1 million that we already expend on capital every year? So what you're saying is you would prefer to have the voters weigh in on them. Would you actually vote to move that to the voters, those kind of funds to the voters next year?
I just meant it should be outlined in the budget, and they should have a chance.
No, Jonathan, that's not the question. The question is, would you vote to move those so the voters could vote on them?
I would have to look closer.
Okay,
at the details.
that's all.
I would.
Thank you.
And then just on the coastal resiliency, I do like the fact that they made a plan. I haven't seen the plan and gone over it in detail in a while. The last time I did, some of the language in the plan was making it more difficult to build docks and for some of the people on the shoreline to enjoy and make the most of their property. And a lot of constituents I talked to mentioned to me that the plan was pretty restrictive. So I got some negative feedback about that plan.
Okay. I have one last question, and then if there's no other comments, then we'll go to vote, and then we'll go on to the next, we'll go to the medical fund balance. Transportation plan. Matt, you had mentioned that this is for consultant expenses, right?
No, this is not for consultant.
Is this also for construction?
This would be for construction demonstration projects, or what they call quick builds.
Okay. Okay. So it's not just consultant fees.
No, we already have
the
the
actual
consultants
physical build construction funds that are associated with this.
Correctly.
All right.
I will add that maybe puts us on a tiny bit of common ground is that I do like that some of the surplus has been used to fund the OPEB fund, but I've commented that the degree of that, or the pace of that, might be a little faster than is kind of something that the taxpayer can bear, because as I say, burden of $1 million or so of current expenses, and then maybe another $1 million on top of it of contribution puts a fairly heavy load on the taxpayer. I don't know the perfect number in my mind, but in my mind, it's a lot of burden each year if you're kind of going at that pace, even though it's a good investment.
That's a good question. What are the breakdown of who contributes what? How much of that is taxpayer and how much of that is employee?
Are we moving on to medical?
Yeah, so I was just going to say, since Jonathan went there with with his comment, why don't we stick with discussion on these items, and then we'll just do the motions separately at the end.
All right.
This way we just keep the discussion flowing. So Mary Jane, would you like to respond to that?
Okay, so
or present the memo for the medical fund balance.
Whatever you want me to do, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, we could go to the memo of the medical fund balance transfer and discuss that. Which was the request of 1.5 million transferred from the medical fund to the OPEB trust.
Okay, so again, the unaudited figure is showing a balance of approximately $6.9 million in the medical fund as of the end of 2021. I'm recommending that the town at least keep 3 months of expenditures in case, and we always keep at least 2. I'm looking to keep at least 3 in the fund, again, because we don't know what the effect of COVID might be, and we want to be sure that we're prepared to take care of that. Plus, we have the items that are already incurred but not recorded, which leaves a remaining balance of about $3.3 million in the fund. So I am requesting that another $1.5 million be transferred from this fund into OPEB. I will just note that this fund does pay all OPEB expenses at the moment. So this money has been put in there on the Board of Ed and the town side to cover whatever OPEB expenses we currently have. And the fund that we've set aside will use this money to earn more money to reduce the amount of tax burden on the people in the future. Thank you.
Could you address Bob's question relative to the respective contributions? I think the answer is probably it's varied over time as our contracts in terms of the employees' contribution to their healthcare has ranged from 18 to 20 or 21%, and that the town has funded the balance of the medical care costs. In addition to that, about 8 years ago, the fund was underwater by $750,000, and both the Board of Education and the town made up the difference because we cannot go back to the employees to fund any of the shortfall. Bob, does that answer the question?
Yes, I just wanted to clarify that, although just wanted to clarify that it's not all taxpayer.
Oh, no. No, there are some employee contributions, but they have no downside risk. The town assumes all the downside risk on the plan.
Right.
So just to confirm the total with the $1.5 million transfer, now the total becomes, I apologize, is it 2. We put $1 million in before?
1.2.
It's 1.2. Okay.
And Mary Jane, I know this is putting you in a difficult position. Mary Jane has already reached out to our actuaries to get an assessment of what the impact will be over time of our contributions as a result of putting $1.5 million in, as opposed to putting nothing in, or as opposed to putting $1 million in now. But the reality is, the more we put in at the front end of this, the less we're going to need to ask the taxpayers in a operating budget expenses. Next year will be the first that we'll have that line item in our operating budget until such time as we're able to wean ourselves off the pay-as-you-go, and we have a substantial balance in the OPEB trust so that we can start paying medical care costs out of the trust as opposed to the pay-as-you-go today. So there's no question that the more money we put in at the front end of this, that it will diminish the impact on an annual contribution basis, which is taxpayer affecting. Mary Jane, am I correct on that?
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thank you.
Now, I believe 1 million was pulled from the medical account in 2019. Does that sound about right?
Correct.
And then in 2020, how much was pulled? Or did we not do?
Actually,
I thought we
it was, we pulled 200,000 from undesignated fund, from general fund surplus in 2019. And then the 1 million was last year from the medical fund.
Okay, so we're looking at investing about 2.7 million when that account opens.
The account is already open, like I said at the beginning. It already has the 1.2 million in it. This 1.5 would be added to it.
So the total will be 2.7 should we approve this.
Correct.
So again, you know, the OPEB investment to me is a great long-term strategy. It's the pace that concerns me. So the current taxpayer is shouldering a lot of the cost to fund this trust, to fuel it.
Well, if they stay in town, they'll see the benefits.
Well said.
All right, well, based on what I'm seeing, I do not have any issue with the 1.5. Based on the amounts, based on just the fact that it's the OPEB trust fund that we're trying to build up and what it's going to do in the long term. So I do not have an issue with the $1.5 million. Does anybody have any further discussion? All right. Mary Jane, thank you for scurrying on that one. I know I confused you and threw you a curveball, but now that we've had our discussions, I'm just going to put the two motions out there. We'll vote and then we'll move on. So the first one will be a motion to authorize the transfer of $1,236,512 from unassigned fund balance to the committed fund balances outlined in the memo dated September 20th, 2021 from our finance director to the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance.
So moved.
Second.
I just want to make sure for just purposes of clarity, is that motion acceptable rather than reading off everything that will be that's part of the record, right? So we're okay.
It is.
All right, good. Just trying to save a little time. All right. We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Abstentions? Okay. The second is a motion to authorize the transfer of $1,500,000 from the internal service fund, which is the medical fund, to the OPEB trust fund as outlined in the memo dated September 20th, 2021 from our finance director to the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed?
Opposed.
Abstentions? Okay. Thank you, everyone. And now we're going to continue on. Agenda item number 8, discuss and take possible action on American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA funding. I think I have motions ready for this one too, but I'm going to let Mary Jane and
I'm gonna let Mary Jane off the hook on this one, because this is largely my design in concert with Mary Jane and department heads, et cetera. So I know it's late in the evening, but I think there's some background that we need to just cover. All told, town of Guilford will receive $6.5 million worth of American Rescue Plan funding over time. We've already received our first allocation. Half of that was received. So that's $3.25 million that's sitting in a reserve account, a dedicated account today. As you may recall, there are buckets that the Treasury Department determined you could spend these funds on. They have not issued their final guidance, but they have issued the preliminary guidance. I have worked with CCM, I've worked with COST, I've worked with the National Councils of Mayors, I've worked with the Government Finance Officers Association to get our best handle on what is legal, because I don't look good in stripes, because if we spend money where we shouldn't, a couple of years from now, although I really doubt the Treasury is going to be able to audit every single town in the country, but we want to stay as close to the requirements as is possible. So you may recall hearing me talk about some of the buckets that it falls into, and I'm going to try to put this into basically 3 different buckets in terms of the way we've been looking at this, my team, myself, my department heads, Mary Jane, et cetera. The first phase or bucket is governmental uses, and governmental uses includes things like youth and family services, social services, our health department, building, all the places where COVID has presented pressure and has created impacts that can be alleviated by additional funding. Another primary area is economic development. It's one of the core tenets of the Treasury. Any impacts on businesses and economic lagging can be remedied through expenditures of the American Rescue Plan funds. The third bucket is parks enhancement. One of the things that was obvious to me and probably to everybody else on this meeting right now is people spending a boatload more time outside doing things that they hadn't done previous to that. I saw more people walking, riding bikes, running, et cetera, sitting in groups out on the green and taking advantage of our recreational facilities up at Bittner, up at Jacobs Beach. Just significantly greater use of outdoor facilities, and that's a key portion of where some of the ARPA funds are going to go, these parks enhancements. Phase two is at this point it's being cooked or put together, and I look at that as some of the publics, the private side. We're really the public sector, but the private side, and that would be nonprofit organizations, families that have been significantly disadvantaged, which may or may not have been able to take advantage of some of the social services programs, and individual businesses. So for that phase, an allowable expense is to bring in a coordinator, consultant, or something to work through how you determine who should be eligible for some of those funds. I'm not sure Matt Hoy should be deciding whether or not Sarah should get some money or Women and Family Services should be getting money. So we want to establish some criteria for distribution of some of those funds. And an allowable expense under the rescue plan is to hire a coordinator or a manager of those processes. And I'm pleased to say that I've already been able to attract 4 folks to help on an advisory committee. I'm looking for at least one more. I'm pleased to say that one of your members, Ken Garriman, has agreed to be part of that committee to work towards establishing the rules and regs on the nonprofit individuals, families, and business side. Also, Ed Meyer, former state senator Ed Meyer, has agreed to participate. Barbara Casey, who, Bob, I know you work closely with her on the facilities task force. Yep. Tremendous asset, bright woman, and looking to give back even more. And then Brendan Sharkey, who some of you may know is a former Speaker of the House of Representatives, who is now a Guilford resident, who called my offices a few weeks ago and said, how can I help? What can I do? How can I get involved? So I'm looking to get at least one more, maybe 3 more, to keep an odd number, as that advisory committee to work with Liza Petra and the Guilford Foundation, because I want to try to run the funding and the resource, that individual resource, that consultant, through her organization. As you may recall, the Guilford Foundation stood up a program at the outset of COVID, where they originally thought they were going to raise $40,000 or $50,000 and distribute it to families in need. Well, they were wildly successful, and Megan, can validate. They ran the program through Women and Family Life Center, and they're the ones that did the design in terms of identifying who should qualify, or the qualification criteria. So I think there's a model in place that I don't want to reinvent. So that would be that secondary phase. Again, I apologize. I'm going longer than I need to, but I'm also going to ask for you guys to agree with the Board of Selectmen that some of the funding areas that we've identified we should go forward with. I will tell you, I'm going to ask for your approval on this tonight, although there is some question as to whether or not we actually have to do that, because these are grant funds. These are not taxpayer dollars, and there are arguments on both sides of the aisle throughout the state on the Connecticut Association of Municipal Attorneys as to who has the legal ability to spend these funds. My feeling is we're all in this together. And I went to the Board of Selectmen this morning and said, would you approve these? And they said unanimously, they said yes. And I'm hoping that you guys would, you folks would be willing to do the same thing. So I'm going to break this into 3 different areas. The first one I think should be on your board pack is initial funding round. And these are decisions that, I hate to tell you guys, we already made. And these are clearly all eligible expenses. The enrichment programs that were designed primarily to help our kids who had been impacted by COVID over the course of the school year by not being able to attend school, by having to do homeschooling, et cetera, and having missed out. I don't think there's any question that education, the delivery of education was impacted significantly by COVID. So summer enrichment programs were one. The first one on your list that you see there is the Youth and Family Services Summer Enrichment Camp. They were able to have 32 campers over 3 weeks. That included all their admission fees, programming, and transportation and staffing, additional staffing they had to bring on. The cost of that camp was $11,500. So I'm requesting 2 years worth of funding, one for the one that has just already occurred, and the second would be for fiscal year 22-23. We would move those funds into a designated account. If you want to talk to Mary Jane about how she's going to track all this stuff, have fun, because I don't know how she's going to do it, but she will. Also at Youth and Family Services, by the middle of July, the clinical caseload for our children was over 100 kids, and normally they are in the 50 to 60 range for clinical caseload. So what we're doing here, you'll see there are 2 positions here. The clinician, one part-time clinician going to full-time will be able to increase their caseload significantly. The salary and benefits cost over the 2-year period, again, the 2-year funding window is $49,000. There is currently an individual who works as the juvenile review case manager. That's otherwise known as a truant officer, but it is funded through Youth and Family Services. That is a part-time position. That individual also does fee-for-service based caseload work, which we actually have to pay them for to handle for all the caseloads that they handle. So we're looking to move that to a full-time position. And the total cost for that over 2 years is going to be $105,000, because that's basically going from a $6,000 plus fee-based arrangement to a salaried position. What I want you to understand is, and there's a note at the bottom of the page on this is a 2-year commitment. And it's a 2-year commitment only. We will have the opportunity during the 23-24 budget year to see whether or not the caseloads and the demand for services for our children, mental health services for our children in this community still exists. At that point, I'm willing to make a decision, go or no go. And if it's no go, then we back those positions out. The Park and Rec program, Summer Enrichment Program, this is a really creative endeavor that was put together between the Board of Education, Parks and Rec, and the Youth and Family Services Program. The kids went to school in the morning, and they went and did recreation programs that were put on by Youth and Family Services and Park and Recreation. Nominal amount of money on the Park and Rec side, $2,700. The summer program, the Park and Rec summer program, which is for the I think it's primarily for the 13 to 15-year-old age group kids, where they take them on trips around the state during the summertime, because they're a little too old for the summer camp at Jacobs. That program, because we had some restrictions on how many kids you could put on a bus, we had to double up the size of. We had to get an additional bus, $5,000 for the summer program. Another eligible expense, because COVID said the COVID criteria was get people outside, get people doing things in the community. Summer concerts on the beach, summer concerts on the green, and also the fireworks are all eligible expenses for that for ARPA funding. And then lastly, this is one that's an interesting, we'll talk about this on a grander scale at some point, but the Treasury had provided guidance that said, if your revenue did not reach a 4.1% increase over your previous fiscal year. So take, for instance, 2019 end of fiscal year, the 2020 end of fiscal year could have had a 4.1% increase in your revenue in total. That's a lot of money. All right. What we've been able to do so far is identify how dramatically impacted Park and Rec was, which significantly reduces their capacity to use those funds to replenish equipment. And also they have, as I think you've all been knowing, you all know, they have been starting to pay for things out of their program fees. It was like the pickleball court or one of the other programs are being paid out of that. So we have the opportunity to replenish program fees for Park and Rec as well. So the total number there is pretty big. It's not as big as the next page, but it's 400 or next couple of pages, but it's $473,000. I'll stop there with any questions on this one before I go forward, or Mr. Chairman, it's up to you. You want me to go through them all, or you want to do one at a time?
No, I think on this one, we're going to do this in a little bit more smaller bites, if the board will allow me to. So I think we'll just open up for discussion, questions, and then we'll take the vote, and then we'll move on to the next one. I just want to say you know, I appreciate all the work and analysis that was done by those involved in the town. I know this took a lot of work to figure out amounts and what is appropriate and quote unquote legal. So appreciate that. And the opportunity for us to weigh in on this. As you stated at the beginning, you don't necessarily need to, or the board doesn't need to, because it's grant money, but having this ability, I think, you know, just shows a combined effort to get out of this and utilize the money effectively. The only comment is when you kind of a little bit sarcastically said, you know, I don't know how Mary Jane's going to record all this. I would make an assumption that this is a bit of, if it's grant money going towards an expense, it would be more or less like a reimbursement or an offset. Is that how you think it would work? Or you just don't know yet?
We do. We have a fund set up for this.
Okay.
Matt was just really being facetious only because he knows how we're going to have. We have to track this better than we've ever tracked anything before. And I'm
It'll
not
be
saying
very
we don't
transparent.
track. And I'm not trying to say we don't track things well, but this more than anything, right now we have this money set up in a separate money market fund at Webster Bank. It's one of the only grants that the federal government has allowed us to do that for. They are allowing us to earn interest on the money. Granted, we're not getting big bucks, but they are allowing us to earn its own interest. Any interest it makes stays within that fund, which is slightly different than how we normally manage our accounts. So all expenditures and all the revenue will flow through the separate fund within our grant fund. And will be very clear to not only the auditors, the federal government, whoever we need to report to, you guys, if you want to see any of it, or taxpayers. So we do have a plan on how we're going to manage that. And thank you for the opportunity for me to share that.
I figured you did. I just wanted to throw it out there. So I that's it. Megan.
Yeah, Mary Jane, and this is just a clarifying question. So I know in there it says fiscal 22 and 23, but isn't it till 25 that you can spend down the money?
We have until the end of 2024 to allocate the money. We have until December 30th of 2026 to spend the money. There is some difference of opinion on what spend means. All right. And I'm very honest. If I were to grant $500,000 to the Guilford Foundation, does that, if I actually cut them a check and it goes there, does that mean we have spent the money? And that's some of the guidance that we're still looking for with the final Treasury rule, but. And
Okay.
again, let's you know, you're gonna see a total number of about a couple $1 million here tonight, and that doesn't exhaust what we already have in the bank, let alone the other 3.25 million we're gonna get, so.
Right, but there's still plenty of time for you to figure that out and to spend the money and to track it.
Right.
So I just wanted to make that clear. Okay.
Well, I always want to act like a drunken sailor and just spend money foolishly, so we may have the opportunity to do that collectively.
I gotta say, this is an opportunity because it's really a gift coming from the federal government, right? This grant. I got a question though.
Sure.
So I'm a little worried. Let's say like it's like a Ferris Bueller day, you know, it's really beautiful. You're going to school, you take a wrong turn, you end up at the beach playing Frisbee. Does this juvenile review board, do they give you like one mulligan?
Jonathan, I don't know the details on that. This is basically just to work and track truancy cases. So a kid, it's for the repeat offenders. This is not a kid who decides to do a Ferris Bueller, which I love that movie, by the way. Thank you very much for bringing that
Not
one
that
up.
I would ever do that.
If typically there's a pattern, like they've already established a pattern of missing.
I was just,
Right.
these are some good programs and I understand where he's going with some of this.
We're getting punchy. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, I know, and I'm going to keep you up even later, so I'm sorry.
All right, so with that, is there anything further on this particular item? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion. And that would be to approve initial funding from the American Rescue Plan in the amount of $473,395 as outlined in the chart provided during our September 20th, 2021 meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Assuming no further discussion. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Excellent. Mr.
Thank you
Howard.
all.
Next
Item
item.
number 2, tourism and economic development ideas. This has already been, will be modified, as I'll tell you in a moment. Economic development is one of the linchpins of the American Rescue Plan, shoring up businesses who have been negatively impacted by COVID, which has a wide interpretation, which is how can we continue to help them grow or recover from any impacts that COVID resulted in. So we think there's a variety of ways that we can do that. One of the things is the Christmas tree lighting, the Christmas tree lights. Every year, that's a huge event downtown that merchants take advantage of. So we're in dire need of replacing the light bulbs on what some folks call the small Christmas tree, which is outside my office. But what's that?
The
Tree in
tree in training.
Yeah, tree in training. That's right. That's right. But it's actually getting bigger, which is one of the reasons why we need more lights, and we can't use duct tape and hold the old set together much longer. I don't know if any of you have seen the welcome signs that are on a couple of our exit ramps here in town.
Very nice.
Very favorable feedback on those. That was an initiative of the Economic Development Commission. They went out to raise private money to put those signs together. The idea was to have one on each of the exit and entrance ramps, or the exit ramps on all 3 of the locations. So 6 of these signs. It's on the exit ramp. Now, you don't want them on the entrance. See you later. Go to Branford. But nonetheless, Jeff, you got that one. Thank you.
Ram.
But nonetheless, they were able to fundraise to the tune of about 30,000, which will buy them 4 of those. And we think it's worthwhile to purchase the remaining 2, plus what they're calling wayfinding signs, which will lead people to areas of interest, to the green, to some of the historic homes in town, to the marina, those kind of things. So all told, we're looking for $20,000 to complete that project to fruition. The Guilford Performing Arts Festival is one that came looking for some assistance for the festival, which, in case you haven't been bombarded by the emails, it is on this weekend. It's a scaled down version of what they had in 2019, which was wildly successful. I think they had over 60 different venues or acts or performances in about 15 or 20 different locations around town. So they came to us originally looking for 15,000, and we've committed 5,000 to help them make sure that program gets successfully completed. This is the one I really like. This is I got to give Sherry Cody some credit on this one, because I had tasked her with basically putting this list together and these beautification grants to businesses. This is conceptual at this point, but $25,000 grants with an application process for businesses to make external improvements to their buildings, their stores, et cetera. Now, I know there's going to be some conflict here with, they don't own the store, but somebody owns 3 or 4 of the storefronts. But I think this is a great opportunity for us to do a facelift or a sprucing of our business. And it doesn't necessarily have to be just downtown. I have a suspicion that program will probably run out of funds pretty quickly. The next is an advertising campaign, development of a website, a business and tourism website. I know the Guilford Preservation Alliance has one today, but we think we can complement what they're doing with theirs. Also is the development of a web application. So when people come in to town, they can hit a web app on their cell phone and say, where are the places we want to go. And a lot of this will also be driven by digital advertising. And we'll try to draw people into our business community. So the Guilford Fair Parade, I'm happy to say, because another group of Guilford citizens stepped up and donated money to alleviate the need for us to have to fund that. This is prior to this was done by the Rotary, and they did a terrific job of raising funds. Over the last couple of years with COVID, that was a very difficult challenge. We actually put together a parade committee, and that committee, which also leaned heavily on the Rotary's experience, were able to fundraise to an extent that they did not need any additional funds. So that 2,500 comes off the top. So we'd be looking for 128,900 for economic development activities. And I'm sorry to go on longer than I should, but can't help myself.
Appreciate it.
Is the amount requested, you've got a range down below?
Let's go to the outside. Any monies that are not spent can get moved back into the big bucket of funds.
I was going to figure that we would go the high range and be conservative and make sure we've got it. So I'll make sure I pose the motion correctly.
I've got more serious questions on this one.
Okay.
Is it okay, Mr. Chairman? Sorry.
Yeah.
I wanted to let you know that I wanted to ask a few things. So, Matt, is there ways to go, much further? So I'm thinking about, businesses that have been locked down that have actually had to shut their doors, businesses that are on their knees because they just have, no income from lockdowns and low traffic. I'm talking about people who are getting foreclosed, tenants who aren't keeping up with their rent, and even for a change, the small landlord who's also, suffering greatly from the situation that we had.
Yeah.
Can we, in a fair way, get some help to them?
Jonathan, thank you for that question. I probably wasn't clear enough in my earlier explanation that phase 2, when I talked about funds for nonprofit organizations, for families who are suffering and businesses who are suffering, I apologize if I skipped over that, but that's part of that phase 2, which we need to develop some criteria similar to what we did earlier with the residences in town. So yes, Jonathan, that is an area that we want to get to relatively quickly, but that's not part of the economic development. What we're trying, this is basically an EDC initiative to drive more awareness and to drive more business in to those folks who are currently in business. But you're absolutely right. That's why we want in phase 2 to try to identify those businesses who need a jolt in the arm. I will say this, John, in my conversations with a significant number of business owners in town. Many of them took advantage of the federal programs. And there have been some who have been hurt. There have been a couple have been hurt. There hasn't been a huge rash of businesses going out of business in our community. We've been very fortunate for that, I think largely because our community supported the local businesses. There is one shopkeeper on the green who I've had many conversations with. She was unable to apply for the second round of the PPP program.
Yes.
Because her year-over-year sales increased dramatically because she had been creative and created a website and a curbside delivery. So there are some businesses in this town, and she's not alone. I know of at least a half a dozen who have had their biggest years in a long time. But you're right. There are some that are suffering and have suffered, and we hope to be able to help those out in phase 2.
Okay, and then the other serious question, I don't know if you'll be as fond of this, but I think the Ohio ruling stands, and that the federal government cannot tell the states not to use the money for tax relief. So let's not forget about our taxpayers.
Jonathan, you and I can agree to disagree on that. I think we could probably have that conversation another night.
All right. To your knowledge, though, that hasn't been overturned. I was trying to figure it out the other night.
It's one case in the federal system, right?
Well, Ohio beat the federal government, the federal court.
We've been presented with nothing through any of the Treasury guidance from our congressional delegation that suggests that we should do anything other than what is dictated by the guidance of the Treasury Department. So, again, we can take this one offline.
Does increasing public Wi-Fi in, say, the downtown area, would that be something that could be added to the economic development?
That is one. It's one we want to take a look at. The question is, who owns the Wi-Fi?
Yeah.
Do we own it? And do we? And as an old telecom guy, there's some issues around. We have rights to access the poles, right? So we could put our own wires up around the poles, right? And create a Wi-Fi network. And then there's some case law in Connecticut right now that's at both at the legislative and at the regulatory area as to whether or not we can actually resell that. Well, I think your point is we wouldn't resell it. We would just absorb the cost of providing Wi-Fi downtown. What you should know is at the library has done a great job of putting in Wi-Fi extenders. So you can basically sit on the green, the northern side of the green, and you can get access to the library's wireless from that area.
Yeah.
In another city in which I lived, every shop owner had hotspots.
Yeah.
And it might be a problem solver to have the economic development people who are seeking to help downtown businesses to encourage them to do the same in return.
Good, great point, Bob.
Yeah.
And maybe even fund us some of it for a little while, right? Until they can see whether or not it benefits them, right?
Yeah.
Great point.
Okay.
I apologize. That's my grandfather clock going off at 10:15, not at 10.
You're a little behind. It's okay.
Matt, if we get some of these wayfinding signs put up, can you take some of the signs down that are on Boston Street? I mean, you can't go 10 feet without seeing another sign.
I know. Jeff, you're preaching to the choir. I think we suffer from sign pollution. Some of them are state requirements, some of them are our own doing, but you're absolutely right. We can look to see what we can eliminate while we put some of these other ones in.
Good point. Thank you. All right. What I'll do is I'll go ahead and entertain a motion if there's no further discussion on this item. And that would be to approve American Rescue Plan funds in the amount of $131,400 for tourism and economic development expenditures as outlined in the chart provided during our September 20th, 2021 meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, last one.
Thank you. Thank you for that. The last one is parks enhancements, and I apologize. We put everything, including the kitchen sink, on this list for you today because this is a list that Rick's been working on, and you will definitely see most of these items in a capital budget plan in either the 5-year plan, or if it's not already there, it will be over the next couple of years. This morning, the Board of Selectmen voted to approve 3 very specific projects on this, but also voted to approve conceptually the balance of them as appropriate for American Rescue Plan funding. Let me walk through the 3 that they specifically said we should do right now. The upgrade of the septic system at Jacobs Beach. We've been having, because of the wild success of our beach, because it's been used more than ever over the last 2 years, we've been pumping that system every 2 or 3 weeks. One of the byproducts of people showing up, right? So we have an opportunity to expand the capacity. We've already reached out to Sonia Marino, who says the system itself is way undersized for what we do. So we want to move forward with replacing that, and we'll go out to bid on that. We had some preliminary estimates. We're waiting on preliminary estimates for the cost of that. The other one is at Bittner Park, the restrooms. If anybody has ever been up there, and it's disgraceful. So that's a key area where we think we can make some impact immediately, replacing the roof, toilets, sinks, and partitions up in that facility. The other one is replacing 6 of the benches on the town green, which are in drastic need of repair. So we're talking what, 40,000, and upgrading the septic system is probably going to be, I don't have a number on it at this point, but what I would like is for you guys to approve moving forward with those 3 projects immediately, and weigh in on the balance of the projects, which I can either walk through them with you, or you can read them and see them yourself. And Mr. Chairman, I'll leave it to you because it is now 20 after 10.
Can I just make a quick comment? Matt, I just wanted to let you know that the benches, the intent was 6 additional benches.
6
not
benches, not replaced. Yeah, I apologize.
Matt, how much total money is available, I guess, for the year or for the whole big bucket?
Right now, we have in an account 3,250,000.
Because, there's a lot of good programs here that benefit the residents generally, but I just feel like we should be targeting the people who got destroyed during the pandemic, economically.
Would that be, sorry, I just wanted to go to that point. Is phase 2 also part of that money, or is that a different?
No, phase 2 would be part of this money. What you're
Okay.
looking at right here is roughly, what is it? 130 and 470. So that's 600 and 1.5. That is 2.1 million of the 3.5. And if I were to allocate $500 or $750,000 to families and businesses that are in need, I think that's probably going to go a long way, Jonathan.
I don't know the measure, how many
Yeah,
people.
well, we don't. Yeah.
And I know it's getting late, a couple things. So regarding, so the cost estimates for the septic are not in the 1.533.
No, they are.
Right. But that is one of the projects that's being looked at as as critical, as well as the benches and as well as the restrooms at Bittner Park.
Right.
Uh,
Mike, you would have the opportunity just approving those three projects at estimated cost or actual cost specific to the septic system.
So I guess my question is, we could approve any amount for parks enhancements as long as we have enough conservatively to have those three done priority. And then look at these and revisit the playscapes at Bittner and Jacobs. But if we say conservatively, 52 for two projects we have, and then another, I mean, I don't know what upgrading the septic at Jacobs would be, but if we say another, I mean, hypothetically 200,000. I mean, I know that's way
Oh,
over.
that would be. I think that's more than enough. If you would like to say you'd authorize up to 50,000, and then if we need more, we'll come back and ask for more.
So we approve out of this. We maybe approve.
102.
I mean, if we do 102, yeah, that's. We approve 102 and keep this parks enhancements funding opportunity chart handy, and then just keep going as we need to, and instead of doing all now and committing to it, to Jonathan's point, we could pick apart projects that are priority, get them funded, and then go to phase 2 and see what we got left.
I feel good about what you did, Matt, but I just would really like to see the money go to the people who got hurt.
We all would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this
I
is
was driving around, I had a piece of paper that says an essential worker, and it made me sick to my stomach. And I was like, everyone's an essential worker. And, my heart is just going out to people whose businesses were locked up.
No, you're not the only one that feels that way. We all feel that way.
Jonathan, one of the
keep in mind that these items, though, are items that also benefit the community. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So
no, I mean,
you may not go directly to them, but it goes to their amenities.
It doesn't help if we shore up the beach and you're getting evicted and your business went under. Sorry, I know I'm being dramatic.
Jonathan, your point is so well taken, which is why there's at least $1 million sitting on the sidelines right now when we can develop a program to identify and qualify the people that you are talking about.
Yeah.
All right. We've already addressed a significant portion of our population who have been struggling through social services, through women and family life services. There are social service agencies that are already been stretched and been doing things to make sure some of the most disadvantaged in our communities are taken care of. We still need to do more, which is why I wanted that phase 2 could be as big as $1 million, Jonathan. But here's the question: how do we evaluate who those people are, and how do we find them? How do we find them, and then determine who is deserving and who isn't?
Much more difficult question than whether we want.
But that's why I listed off a bunch of smart names who are going to be part of that commission. And by the way, just so everybody knows, I got a text a little while ago. Bob Hartman has volunteered to be on that same committee. Thank you, Bob.
What if we did save a little bit of powder, though, for the people who we think need it most, and do some of this park projects, on the tail end when we see what's left?
Well, that up to you guys. And there are some of these park projects. These are estimates, all right. But these are projects that, we will come to you. We're not going to come ask for all 1.5 right away. I don't think we need to do that. So we can slow play this. But, as I said, we may be coming back if we identify, okay, the slit drains at Long Hill Park, that's something we should do sooner rather than later. Quite honestly, construct 2 basketball courts at Bittner Park. That's going to go to replace the basketball courts that we're going to lose at the public safety complex when we build the 4-bay garage. So there, again, like I said, we can slow play this. what I think you need to know is these are the things that are under consideration and could be impacted by these American Rescue Plan funds.
Okay, understood.
Thank you.
I'd also be remiss if I didn't put in my 2 cents for the splash pad.
I knew you.
Well,
would. And
you could make a motion.
absolutely.
You could make a motion.
I really feel very strongly, not only for children with needs, but our senior citizens and a very small population that is underserved, and that is our little toddlers. I honestly believe that, and I would be remiss if I didn't put in my plug for it.
Veronica, can you give us an update on, I know you've collected some funds, and where do you stand and what do you need?
We were impacted terribly by COVID. Our fundraiser just stopped, almost immediately when the town closed down due to COVID. All fundraising went towards, the population that Jonathan is referring to, businesses that have been impacted and so forth and so on. So we stopped fundraising. So to answer your question, we've raised roughly $60,000 in private donations towards the splash pad. And that's where we are. Our little mighty committee is gearing up to start again fundraising. But it's hard because everybody is fundraising and everybody's got their hands out.
Mary Jane, if you would, when Rick gave you this number, is that the total cost of the project?
That's probably the total cost, including the additional parking needed at Jacobs, because without my numbers in front of me, I think we're looking at 150 for the splash pad.
Correct. That the amount that you have takes into account what they have already raised. So this is in addition to what's been raised.
Yeah.
Okay.
So can I throw something out there, and maybe I'll end up putting it in the form of a motion? If we were to approve an amount of 285, that would include the splash pad and 3 projects that were prioritized by the Board of Selectmen. We could either go with the 102 or the 285. What does the board think about that? I know the splash pad has been going on for 3 years or more in fundraising. I think it would be a nice gesture. And I think if we've got the money in this kind of a fund opportunity, we should take it. And then
I would be in favor of that. And I think it's important to note that the splash pad is ready to go. We have all the permitting in process. We're ready to go.
So that could be operational next spring, right?
Yes.
I'd be in favor of that. The 205 or whatever, 285.
285. Jonathan, you're on mute. Sorry.
That does save a lot of powder for some people who we could maybe figure out how to get it to them who need it. So why not?
With that, I'm going to go ahead and entertain a motion to approve American Rescue Plan funding in the amount of $285,000 for parks enhancements, which would include, specifically off this list, upgrading the septic system at Jacobs Beach, the splash pad and expanded parking with guardrail, replacing 6 benches at the town green.
No, adding 6 benches.
Adding.
It says replace.
Yeah,
But it's adding.
Sorry, we're adding. And and restrooms at Bittner Park for the roof, toilet, sinks, and partitions.
Second.
For up to $285,000?
Up to 285, yeah.
Good call.
Okay.
Thank you. Do I hear a second? Did I hear a second?
Yes.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Fantastic.
Mr. Chairman, just
Mr. Howie?
a minute of personal privilege. I want to thank the board for their honest and well-spirited discussion about this in support of these initiatives. I personally have been agonizing over how we get to where we need to get to, and I appreciate your cooperation. And clearly, there's a phrase that I'm very fond of, and that's that this community often exhibits a culture of collaboration. And this is no more evidence of it than I can think of. So thank you very much for your approval of these projects.
Thank you for all your hard work. Appreciate it. So we have item number 9, committee reports, building permits. Anything on building permits? Yeah, I didn't think so. Item number 10, old business. We need to have a vote to remove from the table and take possible action on elected official salaries.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. As we know, we have a couple months ago, we had a subcommittee that was composed of Veronica Wallace, Robert Hartman, and Megan Scanlon regarding the elected official salaries. I'm not sure who is going to report back on behalf of the committee, the subcommittee, but I will leave it to the three of you to present your analysis, findings, and suggestions or recommendations.
Well, the committee met through email and in person, and we had very deep discussions. And we would like to recommend, I guess my first question is, how do you want to do this, Mr. Chairman? Do you want to do both the Board of Selectmen and the First Selectman salaries in one discussion or one vote, or do you want to take them separately?
I was thinking of taking them separately. I think that would be easier to do.
The recommendation that our committee is making for discussion with the Board of Finance is that there is no change in salary for the Board of Selectmen. They are at the higher range in comparison to other towns. And it was just felt that the board, while they work very hard, so does the Board of Education and the Planning and Zoning boards, both of which, are volunteers and do not get a stipend. So it was felt that we would like to hold the salaries on the Board of Selectmen. Bob, do you have anything else, or Meg, do you have anything else you want to add to that?
No, and the data is, and everybody has the data. You can see they're at the top of the list for local towns and all of our comparables.
Okay. So we'll stick on that. Any comments, discussion on that? I agree with all the backup that we've received. I have no disagreement with that recommendation. Anybody else have any comments? Otherwise, I'll put it in the form of a motion. Entertain a motion to not increase the salary of the Board of Selectmen members for the 4-year period between, I was going to do fiscal years, but I guess I could do it fiscal year 22-23 through fiscal year 25-26.
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
Then most of our discussion revolved around the First Selectman's position, and keeping in mind that the position oversees the entire town, a large budget. And through charter revision years ago, it was designed to be a 4-year term to make the position enticing for people willing to run, not necessarily a retired person or something. We were looking to get younger people involved in enticing them to run for the First Selectman's job. We also discussed the fact that the First Selectman's position, there are several town employees that he is responsible for, but they make more money than the first selectman's position. Those positions have the ability to move on to other towns or other jobs. The first selectman's job does not. So there is that difference. We looked at all the salaries and mill rates of the surrounding towns, which is in our board pack, as you can see. And we discussed and unanimously decided that we would like to recommend for the Board of to the Board of Finance, the following percentage increases over 4 years. The first year, 0.5% increase. Second year, 1.0% increase. Third year, 1.25% increase. And the final year, 1.5% increase for a 4-year average of 4.06%. And that's what the committee would like to recommend to the Board of Finance for discussion and action.
Okay. Opening up to the board.
So I'll just comment that I think it's a very conservative scale. And, I think it's like sort of sets an example when sometimes we ask for the town employees to take a, moderate increase to protect the town. I don't really think it's a complete reflection of our first selectman's performance, which has been excellent, but, we're trying to manage the town in a conservative fashion. So I think it's
point, Jonathan.
fairly good recommendation.
To your point, Jonathan, that was something that we struggled with because we felt that the current first selectman has done an extraordinary job in extraordinary times. But this, we couldn't look at it from that perspective. This is about the position, not the person holding the position. And ultimately, the performance of the person in the position is decided by the electorate. So we don't have the ability to do bonuses or things like that. So we had to look at it from a very, with blinders on. We couldn't look at the individual, unfortunately, because we wanted to, but we just can't do that. It's about the position.
We did look at many factors, and of course, one of the good news is it's at the top of the range for the area and for a comparable. So we're starting at the top of the pops. So some of this is optics, and the rest of it is as Veronica just described. But we did even look at performance-based or bonus situations. We looked at it a number of different ways.
That's hard.
First and foremost, I appreciate and thank the subcommittee. It's never easy, especially when most of us know, some of us more than others, how difficult it is to set salaries. And like you said, the optics, the perception, and sometimes it's the role, not the person in the role. And it's tough when you really, really like the person in the role.
Oh.
And they're doing an incredibly good job. And we all know that. But I do appreciate I'm sure it was a very difficult discussion. But I believe that the recommendation is in line and fair to what's going on in the surrounding towns and the climate we have. So that would be my personal opinion. Anybody else?
I think it's a good job.
Okay.
I agree with the committee.
All right, with that, I will entertain a motion. Hopefully I got these numbers right. Entertain a motion to increase the salary of the first selectman over the next 4-year period as follows: 0.5% for fiscal year 22-23, 1% for fiscal year 23-24, 1.25% for fiscal year 24-25, and 1.5% for fiscal year 25-26.
That is correct.
Okay. Do I hear that as a motion? Or
So
can I-
moved.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. We're getting there.
Thank you. Thank you all.
I have 2 items under old business, unfortunately, but I do. And they're really old too. Our continued old business item of meeting in person. We've heard a lot tonight about technology and what it can do for us to be able to do that in a hybrid fashion. I will be honest. I am pushing very, very hard to have an in-person meeting in October. And maybe it's a little bit selfish, but I'll be honest, I would like to see Mr. Gammerman in person for his last meeting. And I would really like to see that happen. If we can't, we can't. But if we can, I'd like to do everything we can to do so. So that's my emotion getting into this a little bit. I'd like to leave it to Mr. Hoey, as he just put his hand up, to tell us what the possibilities of that might be.
Mike, thank you very much. I share the same sentiment. I would love to be in person with my good friend Ken's for his last meeting, considering the fact that we sat at the same table for 25 years or something like that. Just a couple. The vendor that we have selected to put the equipment in at the community center is actually in there this week installing the gear. So I think there's a strong opportunity for you guys to be able to meet in a hybrid fashion or an in-person fashion, and or no hybrid, depending on how you want to do it. But I think you'd be able to accommodate a hybrid meeting in that in your traditional meeting room for your October meeting. If something were to happen where that didn't manifest itself, you'd certainly be welcome to do something in the Selectmen's Conference Room. And based on the overwhelming public interaction we've had tonight, I think some of us could do remote. Mary Jane might not have to drive all the way to get here, but I think we could probably put eight of us or 9 of us in that room in the Selectmen's wing. So I think you ought to try to plan for an in-person or / hybrid meeting. I think you'll be okay with that.
And keeping that on our regular Monday, third Monday, I'm sorry, it's October. What's the date on the next meeting? Hold on, I'll tell you because I'll look at the calendar. October 18th. Thank you. The 18th. Assuming we can get, I'm assuming we can get the selectmen's off at the conference room pretty easily on the 18th.
I think I can make that happen.
Yeah, and the community center, if the technology was ready or is ready, then we could do it there as well. We just have to make sure the room is available. But either or.
I think the rooms, I think we booked the rooms for your meetings in the event that you decided to go in person. I'll confirm that with Rick tomorrow. And if not, we'll move somebody else out of there and they can go somewhere else.
All right, so for the first time, I think I could say with confidence that we are going to do everything we can, and we are going to meet in person on October 18th on Monday at 7:30. Room to be determined. TBD. Great. Thank you, Matt. The other item, and I'll keep this really brief, we've been discussing a tour of the facilities. You saw an email. We had a little bit of correspondence about that. I think it would just make the most sense to wait until after the election based on possible new board of finance members. I'm sure it won't be too cold in December that we can't do a tour or at some later date, but I think we should just wait that out another month or two. I wasn't thinking of that a couple months ago, but now with the election coming up, I think we should just push off for another couple months. Okay. Anything else under old business?
I'd be fine with the November date instead of December.
We could do a November date based
18th.
on. Yeah, are we thinking the same day of our meeting?
Yeah. Scare them good.
No, wait. November 15th would be the Monday.
Don't
All
they
right,
also
well,
have to get
we could
sworn in at
tentatively.
that meeting?
What's that, Megan?
They also have to get sworn in at that meeting, right?
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind with the.
Or
Well,
can-
they can be sworn in anytime prior to the meeting. If they
Yeah,
elect,
after.
if they want to do so.
After election and before the meeting, yeah, so. Okay. All right, anything else under old business? New business, I apologize for the sirens going underneath my window. It's perfect timing. Let it go by. Okay, my only item under new business, I just wanted to indicate and congratulations on the general obligation refunding bonds that was in the paper that our finance department and Mr. Hoey were involved with. Just very quickly, this had to do with the 2015 bonding for the towns for our high school. And with the refinancing, the town was able to reduce the interest rate on the bonds from 3% down to
1.27.
1.27%. And that's going to save us in excess of $2.4 million over the next 14 fiscal years. So I just wanted to acknowledge that of our finance department. Mr. Hoey, you'd like to add something? Please.
Yeah,
do.
one point. Bob Hartman, thank you for having been the advocate for this a couple of years ago to make sure that we stayed on track and could comply with the federal regulations on when we could refund. Nice, job well done.
It's a pleasure, and there's a potential that we might, we know we can do 2 more, but the rules may soften that we can do even more than that, I take.
Yeah. We'll take advantage of it, as long as the interest rates stay where they are. Let's do it.
Yeah.
And in real terms, that's $170,000 next budget cycle.
Free money.
Yeah.
Well done.
Splash pad money.
Yeah.
Yeah, different
All
source.
right.
Anything else under new business? Public forum. I see no public at 10:48 at night. So with that, thank you for a very productive meeting. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Bye.
Thank you all.
Good night,
Thank you,
everybody.
And everyone.
Night.
I'm just thankful I don't have to drive home. Thank you.
I was gonna say, have a safe trip home, Mary Jane.
Bye.